The guy thanked him for the job and handed over the reward, calling him Scaropiron and telling him to come back soon. But our MC knew this tiny payout was nowhere near enough. Sure, having cheat powers in another world is awesome, but this guy didn't even pick a fighting skill. He's all about alchemy, making and selling items just to pay the bills. He can't make the pricey potions because the ingredients are either hidden in death traps or cost a fortune, and the market is already totally flooded with cheap basic stuff. Newbies always get stuck with the garbage jobs that take forever, and even though he's used to the grind, he can't hire any help because he has to keep his insane powers a total secret. He started thinking about buying a servant. He knew a magic contract would force them to keep his secrets no matter what. It felt pretty wrong, but he had to do it to stay alive. As soon as he walks in, a friendly salesman greets the new face and asks who he's looking for, but he just says he needs a master for some super delicate work. The merchant offers him a girl who always follows orders, telling her to be super friendly to Paracelsus, while bragging that even if she isn't a total beauty, she's highly skilled and a perfect partner. Our guy checks the price tag and realizes it's actually a total steal. The girl whispers that creepy weirdos are always hanging around, and if one of them buys her, things are gonna... Our guy gulps hard, and the merchant is sure he's about to cry, thinking he looks way too broke to waste time on, so he just wants him to buy something and get out of there. Paracelsus then spots a girl in a cage with no price tag, and the merchant explains she's an elf who's been tortured for hundreds of years, leaving her without arms, legs. Elven blood sells for a fortune, so this guy kept her locked up just for the cash, but lately, he couldn't get a single drop out of her and figured it was... Paracelsus agrees to the deal, but while he's thinking the merchant is totally trying to rip him off, he just plays it cool and points out how exhausted the girl looks. He pointed out that fresh elf guts are super expensive and asked for a discount on them, and the first girl, making the guy wonder if he was even a real alchemist. The merchant asks for a massive 200,000 zeni for both items. He totally agrees to the price without a second thought. The guy knows it's super expensive, but to keep them from causing trouble, these servants are locked into a magic contract that forces them to obey every single command, and they can only look out for their own safety if it doesn't get in. For the first girl, the owner has to give her at least a 3% cut of the profits she helps make, and once she pays him 800,000 zeni, she's officially free with full rights. Plus, any kind of violence against her is totally banned. Even if you're starting from the absolute bottom, you can become a big deal in this country if you just grind hard. This rule has been the law of the land for a whole. Parizels asked for the contract deets, and the elf told her there were only 2 rules: obey the master and stay safe, but there wasn't any special deal in there. The merchant said the deal was done and handed over the servants, but as he asked for the contract, our guy started screaming that he was burning up while the man told him to stay put. The seller brags that he's finally a real adult, and when Paracelsus asks what happens if they break the rules, the guy explains the contract works like a hypnosis spell that forces both of them to obey. The merchant demands his cash within a week because this check is straight up cursed, and since every day you hold it makes your life way worse, he secretly thinks he'll never get used to these creepy payments. A bit later, Paracelsus heads out with the girls, and when a servant asks if his magic is actually legit, he just smirks and says, "You could say that." He realized this wasn't magic at all. He just had access to crazy skill recipes from all over the universe. If he followed the steps perfectly, he was basically guaranteed to succeed. But he checked out the recipe that popped up and saw it was actually super easy, so he told Norah to grab some of the ingredients while he handled the rest, and they agreed to meet up at the square. She admitted she couldn't read, so he told her they'd go together, and Norah even asked to carry his heavy load for him. They finally make it to his house, where she introduces herself again and swears she'll do literally anything he asks, so he finally tells her his name too. He told them to stop wasting time and get to work, so they used the easiest ingredients to whip up a mana potion that works especially well on elves. First, you toss the healing herbs and spirit powder into the pan with some oil and fry it until the color shifts, which makes the girl joke that it feels just like cooking while the boy smiles. First, you gotta pour water in the pot, toss in the stuff from the first step, and really focus on that river mouth vibe. Once it starts boiling, the meal is done, he explains. Norah asked if he was actually gonna slice her open once she got better, even offering to help since she'd done it to a cow before, but he told her he wanted to keep her body in one piece. She asks if he's doing this because elves are so rare, and he's like, pretty much. So now that the potion is ready, it's time to get a closer look at her. He asked her if she knew the girl's name, but the woman said she had no clue because the merchant just called her nameless. Paracelsus told Elf he was going to check her out starting with her head, but when he looked inside her ear, he saw so many old scars that her eardrum was totally wrecked and would never heal. The skin looks totally trashed after being buried in the dirt for so long. It's actually in way worse shape than he even imagined. So he calls Norah over to take a look at the bottom. She did exactly what he said, scanning every inch of the place before reporting back that everything was totally clear and under control. He promised her everything was cool and the water wouldn't boil over. Then he asked her to go grab some more from the garden well, and she was totally down for it. Paracelsus tells her he's going solo while she stays to watch the elf, promising to shout when the water's ready, but she yells back that she's got this whole thing under control. The bath was finally ready, and Norah could tell the salt was just right. Our hero checked the temp. It was perfect, so he even dropped some in his eye to make sure it. The guy explains they're giving her a medicinal bath, and when Norah asks why she doesn't just drink the medicine, he warns that her body is so weak she'd just puke it all up instantly. She had to soak up every drop of that medicine, but the second the elf hit the water, she started panicking until Paracelsus told her to chill because it was just a normal bath. He hoped the medicine would drain all that magic from the bath, so he stepped up to the tama flower and carefully peeled back one of its petals. He walks up to the bath and drops a flower in, explaining that the petals soak up mana and turn dark blue when they're full of energy, making Norah freak out over how cool his magic is. Our hero explains that the second the flower changes color, you have to dump the potion into the bath, and right on cue, the petals turn snow white, leaving everyone totally blown away. Paracelsus thought he barely poured anything even though it was a whole day's worth, but then the petal flashed blue and snapped right back to white, making him sigh and wonder if someone was just messing with him. He realized she was totally starving, so he dumped the whole potion out and told her he'd go find a fresh one. Norah called him over, yelling that his healing was insane, and told him to come see how the elf's hair was literally glowing. She asked why they were glowing, but he told her it's not just about the light. If you look from far away, they actually look kind of dull. Grabbing the elf girl's hand won't feel special at all since she's barely made of real flesh, and Norah even asks if he gets lightheaded whenever they touch. She asked if that was really how big an elf's astral body gets. Paracelsus realized she was actually paying close attention to him. He admitted he'd seen ghosts before, but wizards everywhere call this stuff mana, and they all agreed on the name since there are so many magic users in the world. Everything in this world is built from fire, air, water, earth, astral bodies, and metals. These are the building blocks for literally everything, and while magicians use them to pull off, they say your body is just a shell for your spirit and your spirit holds your soul. But what if the basic elements took over that spot instead? Is that even possible? He shouted that this was exactly what he needed, and even though he didn't totally get how it worked, he knew this was their big chance to finally fix her body. Everyone's body is super picky, so even a perfect fake limb will just rot and fall off unless you use the original parts that actually belong to it. He's convinced a hand made from primordial matter will fit him perfectly, so he just needs to find enough of it. But he eventually admitted the whole plan was a total bust. This first matter is trying to disguise itself as regular everyday stuff. Once it does, it'll be totally impossible to tell it apart from anything else. For now, people can only use tiny. He showed Norah a flask full of all the stuff he'd spent the whole year gathering, but they had to get its power back first, before they could finally move it over to the bed. A little while later, our hero is chilling in the library when Norah checks in on him, so he tells her he's hunting for info on elves while she lets him know the girl is. Paracelsus thanked her and admitted he'd be totally lost without her, but suddenly Norah started shaking and collapsed, making him freak out. She promised she was totally fine, and that it was just her special mark acting up, and since she actually feels better when people hype her up, she flashed the mark on her chest to show them. Paracelsus tried to apologize for what he did, but she told him he should be thanking and praising her more. Then she suddenly put her hand right on the mark as everyone watched in. She whipped out a scroll and realized she was totally right. It was a reward list that updated itself every single time he gave her something new. He says he gave her nothing, but she tells him his heart made the call, and just knowing he'd struggle without her was the only reward she ever wanted. Norah admitted she couldn't read and asked for help, so he checked the numbers and told her she made a 3% profit, putting 25,000 zeni in her account. And she says she'll be free in a second, so he reminds her about the 200,000 zani for the merchant and hands over the bag of cash. Norah promised she got the message, so he handed over another bag with 20,000 inside, telling her to go on a shopping spree and keep the change for herself. She stood her ground and told him that even though she's a servant, she's no beggar, and she's gonna earn her own cash to buy her freedom and pay him back every. He claimed her as his own and told her to get changed and rest up so she'd be ready to grind tomorrow, basically just making sure his investment stays in top shape. Norah was super embarrassed and quickly blurted out that she'd bought the elf a gift too, but while he thanked her, he realized he'd totally forgotten she even existed. This girl is wandering the city streets thinking about her past, and even with her short hair and the chains on her wrists, she can still hear a voice in her head saying that slaves are. The guy complains that he's never met girls this rude, but the merchant just smiles and tells him he's unlucky. The man says at least he finally got everything off his chest, and the merchant just laughs at him. As soon as the guy bailed, the merchant realized he was totally done with people who treat servants like trash, and since the contract was a hot mess, he had to rewrite the whole thing from zero. He told Norah to be polite and greet the older guys because manners still matter even now, but she just ignored him and looked the other way. The merchant just laughed and told her she needed to learn some respect, promising to train her into the perfect servant and teach her everything she needs to know. Norah's determined to master the local language, so she asks him to teach her the letters so she can read every book, get smart, and escape this place as fast as possible. The merchant sneered and asked if she was really that clueless, saying only a broke loser would ever buy her and he probably doesn't even own a single book. He asks if she knows who idiots love most, and since it's people even dumber than them, he tells her to act like she can't read, so they'll feel smart. The trader tells her that even though everything looks totally insane right now, there are still rules to follow and ways to get rich off the chaos. A bit later, she gets back home from her bath, and our MC looks up from his book on the couch to tell her he's found something totally wild for them to see. Legends say that elves were the very first ones to ever show up in this world. They were built to look exactly like God, made from the same stuff as his own body. This made, he whipped up dragons from fire, dwarves from metal, and humans from the dirt. But none of these guys were quite right. Only the elves became his absolute favorites. They could live forever, and our MC asked what happened to the elves' immortality and found out they lose it the second they fall for a human. So he rushed back to Norah and told her she really needed to check out the. He stood up to show her something, but she whispered that she couldn't read, so Paracelsus asked why she was dressed like that. Norah says she got it for basically nothing, and reminds him he said she could spend his money however she wanted, so he awkwardly agrees right before she asks what he actually hates. Our guy asked if she'd really get a massive reward just for a simple touch, and she just smirked, telling him if that's what he thinks, they'll roll with it. She's surprisingly chill while explaining how the owner called her beautiful and wanted to use her body to make a ton of money. Paracelsus touched her and wondered if her skin was so soft it would just melt away, but she also felt totally strong and full of life, and that's exactly when he said okay, and then she actually reached out to touch him. He tried to play it off, joking she was going to drain him dry, but Norah just told him that if he really wanted her to quit, he should just say so. The next morning, Norah asks how much cash they've stacked up, and the MC laughs as he tells her they've hit 2 million zeni, making her crack up too. Paracelsus straight up admitted he was a total failure as a master. He actually let the servant go the very next day after buying them. Since he was basically out of supplies, he told her that even though they only had one day together, he had a total blast, even more than getting his freedom back. He promised her to never forget he's always got her back. Norah immediately demanded to know what he meant because she had zero interest in being free, and her answer totally stunned the guy. She told him she'd never find another gig that pays millions in a single night, and that they'd get rich together, and even though he could have just ordered her around, he stopped. He asked if she'd stay and work for him once he was finally free, but she warned him that would make the contract's magic vanish. Paracelsus thought it over and figured she should just leave the money exactly how it is, telling her that it's actually a great move. Norah asks if he's cool with the plan since he'll have to hand over every last cent, and he just sighs and agrees because, honestly, being totally broke sounds like a nightmare. He says he's super lucky to have her around, and even though it sounds crazy, he's actually hyped about her massive debt because he's going to grind even harder to pay it off just so she can stay as long as she wants. Paracelsus explained the elves needed a super pricey cure to get their magic back, and while he was trying to fix her body, he also owed Norah a ton of cash. He explains that's why he's trying to make some extra cash. She tells him it's a great plan, and then he slams a massive stack of papers right onto the table. Norah asks what the deal is, so he tells her it's a journal of every single thing he's ever made and suggests they look through it together to find some answers. She asked if he forgot she can't read, but he told her she only needs to know 4 signs, S for the top and C for the bottom. Every entry has a chart showing the price and how hard it is to make or store, but the numbers are a bit off since he just eyeballed everything based on his gut. Mithril silver is super rare and hard to make, but it's totally safe to handle, lasts forever, and is always worth a ton of money. She was just dropping these facts like they were common sense. They dove right in, and just when she thought they were finished, he told her they were still having a hard time getting the materials for B and C. They finally pick out the super tough S and A rank recipes to narrow down their choices, but she's confused why they're ignoring the price, since she's just trying to make some serious. He told them those items need super rare and pricey materials, and if they don't sell, they'd lose a ton of money, so they're sticking to simple stuff that's easy to sell and way safer. She was worried that making this thing was so complicated it might actually be dangerous, because if it breaks, they can't sell it, and if they get hurt, their whole plan is basically over. Paracelsus said it was all good, and he'd explain later, but first they had to handle these guys, and Norah agreed since they couldn't afford to take any dumb risks. They found 3 recipes in the notes that were a perfect fit, including a super versatile magic bomb, a luck potion for a guaranteed good day, and communication bells to make messaging a total breeze. Norah wondered what they could craft and figured a luck potion was the way to go, and even though he agreed, he wanted to make sure it wasn't too hard or dangerous to pull off first. He asked if he still had to keep the secret after the deal ended, and she told him that once the contract is over, all the rules are totally gone. She explains that he can just command her to forget every secret once the deal is over, but he knows that messing with someone's memories is a seriously dangerous and OP power. Norah totally agreed and said the magic formula was actually super long, and since this servant contract was stacked on top of another promise, it was basically impossible to break. She acted like a total pro who knew every secret, but then she just laughed and admitted she was actually clueless and only heard some merchant gossiping about it. Paracelsus thought that was awesome and told her to spill even more next time, and she almost said yes before realizing she'd already told him every single thing she knew. He asked to see her massive magic formula even though he knows 0 about spells, so it'd probably go right over his head, and when he reached out his hand, she totally left. Norah warns him that only servants are allowed inside, and since anyone else gets hit with a brutal curse, he quickly apologizes for the mistake. Becoming a servant means tying your life to a massive curse, and by signing that contract, he's officially trapped by the oath too. Norah promised she'd never snitch, but her real secret weapon is how hard she works, and the MC just grinned because he's known that for ages. Paracelsus told her that alchemists would literally die for this secret, but he warned her that knowing it would put a massive target on her back for some really dangerous people. She swore she'd never spill the secret even if things got brutal, so he asked if she was scared of dying right then and there. He told her that picking a side is easy, but facing the Paracelsus is about to drop a major secret, but he warns her that if she breaks their deal or if anyone else tries to find out, she'll forget the whole thing instantly. He made it clear this was a direct order, and once she nodded, he finally dropped the bombshell. He's actually from another world. He used to live in a totally normal world with 0 magic, and even though some things sucked, his life was actually pretty chill. He's never going back to his old world, so he's keeping quiet about the fact that he got absolutely wrecked by a truck and died. He wakes up in a totally strange place and meets an old guy named Laus, who blows his mind by telling him he's actually been reincarnated into a whole new world as Paracelsus. The guy told him he had a massive gift for his second birthday. He could pick any 2 broken cheat skills from this catalog. Our hero was trying to figure out if this world was even worth the trip, but the man just sighed and told him to quit asking questions and make a choice already, while Paracelsus apologized for the whole situation. He didn't want to pick fighting skills because he'd be stuck battling forever just to stay alive, so he looked for an ability that could actually save him when things got crazy. Then our MC reveals he picked skills to master every recipe in the building and create checkpoints, and even though the old man shrugged it off like it was no big deal, he still went along with it. The guy told Paracelsus to go to sleep, promising he'd wake up in a brand new world where he could finally live life exactly how he wanted. Our guy wakes up in a totally different world and somehow already knows exactly how to use his insane new powers. Paracelsus figured Norah wouldn't believe him, but she told him to finish the story first so she could decide for herself. Then she asked if his powers were actually alchemy. He explains that whenever he picks a meal to cook, the ingredients and steps just pop up in his notebook, which has 5 recipe slots and infinite pages, and he can even mix and match them just as long as you follow the steps exactly. It doesn't matter if you're a total beginner. The result is going to be perfect every single time. Once the item is finished, the space. He's also got this epic power to create save points using special gemstones, but the catch is that making a new one instantly deletes the old one. If he smashes this stone, he'll warp right back to the exact time and place he made it while keeping every single one of his memories. To pay for this, he has to give up every memory and feeling of the thing he loves most. Ever since that stone shattered, he hasn't touched that skill even once. Norah tells him, it would be a total disaster if this thing suddenly snapped. He keeps it tucked away in a super tough box made of mithril silver. There's no lock, but only the people he chooses. He promised he'd do whatever it takes so she could see it later, but if he didn't make it, she had to smash the stone. And when he asked if she could actually handle, Norah dropped a massive bombshell. If her master dies, her contract breaks and she'll be forced to forget every secret she's kept, including the stone, which left our hero totally speechless. He admitted he was getting ready for the worst since it was super obvious, but then she straight up asked him if he was actually making a bomb. Paracelsus wondered what would happen if she only remembered that one secret, but she told him to slow down and think it through before making a big move. He asks if she has any questions, so she tells him she needs to see if his power is actually legit, and once he proves it, she demands he make a brand new crystal right then and there because it has to be created the exact moment she learns the secret. Then he hands her a gold Hermes coin from the Society of Alchemy, a group of elite alchemists who help people level up their rank. Alchemists are the absolute masters of money, and nobody else even comes close to their level. The front of the coin features Hermes Trismegistus himself, the legendary big boss of all alley. On the back, there's a red-eyed owl that stands for wisdom. But in this land, a lunar eclipse is a total warning sign for bad luck and sickness. To create the fish of happiness, they need 100 gold coins, a perfect tank, some gravel, algae, and a goldfish. If they actually pull this off, they'll prove that these... Our hero explains you just have to stand by the tank and toss a gold coin from eye level, and as Hermes smiles back, they realize they're already holding on to a little piece of happiness. Paracelsus explained that a screech owl showed up right as they flipped the second coin, totally killing their luck, so now they have to flip them back and start the whole thing over. Once the coins land on the right side, they're buried under gravel and seaweed for the rest of the day. As soon as the water is crystal clear, they toss in the caviar. Norah points. She asks if it's alchemy, and he explains that real alchemy turns basic metal into gold, even if the power is actually pretty weak. Norah told him straight up that nobody would buy that junk, but he argued that people only trust official alchemist stamps and avoid sketchy sellers, though she still wasn't convinced. Paracelsus points out she finally gets how tough it is to make the fish of happiness show up, and she's like, yeah, I'm never doing that. But then he reveals the notebook is finally making its big entrance on stage. This weird object suddenly catches fire in the kid's hands, and he shouts that it's a recipe for happiness fish, but Norrie just thinks he's messing around. He smacked his forehead and shouted that he finally figured out how to use the gold coins, and as the girl panicked and asked what was wrong, he explained there are actually tons of different ways to farm luck. He remembered the trick and immediately scribbled it down in his notebook. There's a secret recipe that makes every coin you toss into the aquarium land on heads. If this power is the real deal, then that's exactly what's going to happen. Norah looked into the tank and saw the coins floating up like Hermes, with 4 already sitting on the right side, while our hero told her to shout if even one of them landed in the wrong. Paracelsus felt how heavy the coins were, but told them not to quit, especially since all 100 of them landed on the same side in a total miracle. He asks if she actually trusts him, and when she says yes, she wonders how anyone else wins with only 100 coins, so he explains they use luck-boosting gear but still struggle. Our MC says he needs to clear some space, so he's got to finish the whole process right now. Next up is the gravel. Norah asks if she can help, but he tells her he'd. She asked if raising fish was really that hard, and if they could grow any bigger, but he told her it's best to just leave things alone and not add any more. He's got 3 big problems. Selling fish for top dollar is basically impossible. Getting that official certificate costs a literal fortune, and he's got to hide his insane luck because those shady alchemists will totally backstab him if they find out. Norah was totally on board, and Paracelsus said they just had to wait for the egg to hatch. But when she asked if she could grab her coins yet, he told her the recipe says they have to wait for the baby fish to grow up first. She was worried about leaving the gold coins there since they're worth a fortune, but he just told her to chill because nobody ever visits the aquarium anyway, and then he just took off. I looked around and told them the smell was super faint, but with the shade from the old building and the sticky air, this definitely had to be the spot. She starts crawling across the floor, finds a grasshopper, and jams it into the dirt right next to the others. She reached out to the spirit sleeping in the ground and begged it to finally speak to her. This is Norah Patan, a sorceress who traveled from a super faraway land. Norah. Suddenly, this creepy, one-eyed monster bursts out of the ground and asks the girl if she's the one who summoned it, and she just calmly tells him that, yeah, it was her. She's freaking out that some thief might swipe the treasure her master left right out in the open. The spirit is totally confused why he'd leave something so pricey completely unguarded. Norah just explains. The spirit told her to chill and just trust him since he's a pro at staying hidden, and he was hyped that she called him a real spirit even though he's pretty modest. Right then, the spirit vanished back underground. He wasn't exactly a powerhouse, but she really liked how hard he worked and how easy he was to talk to. Honestly, she'd never met. She thought about how people say you always end up living near spirits that are just like you, and she just gave a little laugh. Our hero says his recipes are the real deal, so now he has to choose between a magic bomb, a luck potion, or a communication bell. And that luck potion is basically a happy fish that brings... Keeping your gear clean is a total must, and get this. Being a drunk traveler actually makes you way less likely to get jumped by monsters or hit by weapons. Paracelsus held up the potion and realized it was the real deal. The kind of stuff even the most powerful people with tons of enemies never leave home without. And selling just one recipe could make you rich for the rest of your life. Norah told him it was time to start making the goods, but the guy reminded him there's always a catch since that Alchemist Guild certificate costs a fortune, making him pull a face in total. Nobody's gonna buy this stuff without a manufacturing license. We need proof it actually gives you luck, and all that paperwork is just gonna eat up our profits. He's using 20% of the batch just to test it out, and when the girl asks why he doesn't just try it himself, he tells her that if he could do that, he wouldn't even need those official certificates. Norah asks how to tell if her luck actually went up, so Tatsu says a coin flip works, but apparently people are using beetles for that now. They grab 100 bugs, mark one with paint, and use a luck-boosting item on it just to see how long it survives while they crush the others one by one. Our MC wonders if he's being dumb for just tossing coins instead of taking lives, and Norah confirms that killing someone definitely makes the whole thing way more powerful. It's basically dark magic, but the more lives this seer takes and the more his victims suffer, the luckier he gets. Paracelsus noticed she was super confident talking about witchcraft and asked for more info, but she just shrugged it off and said they should get back to talking about potions. The second big problem is the tiny time window, because some ingredients only work under a full moon, and the second they're ready, every alchemist buys them all up. Our hero realized that even if they brew the potion, they're still stuck waiting for the full moon, and when Norah asked if that meant another 2 weeks, he told her there was a third, way more annoying problem waiting for them. The The stuff they made turned out so insane she actually got worried it was too much, but he told her to chill since they'd just make way more money anyway. Every luck potion you can buy is either low-rank garbage or a total scam, and since these alchemists are pretty bad at their jobs, their drinks are actually full of bad luck because they can't get the balance right. You'll basically never see a Class B luck potion for sale, and since nobody even knows if Class A ones are real, Norah finally asked him what he was actually brewing. He tells her that just by following the recipe, he somehow crafts S-rank potions every single time, and the girl is absolutely losing it. She thought things were going great, but he told her she was dead wrong because shady alchemists were spying on them 24/7 with golems and fake fairies, and one mistake meant a rookie could lose everything in a heartbeat. Losing your job is one thing, but every year a star rookie just vanishes, so Norah totally agreed that standing out is way too dangerous. As soon as they finished getting ready, she suggested making a luck potion, and her face suddenly got super serious. She explained the plan was simple: find rich buyers and sell them the goods under the table without any paperwork. That way they'd be making bank in no time. And if those big spend... He tried to tell her it was impossible, but she was dead set on making it happen, so he just moved on to the next recipe. These are connection bells, forged at the exact same time to be perfect matches, and the more identical they look, the more insane their powers actually get. He admitted he made the pair himself, and she told him they look like a perfect match, almost like they're ringing in total sync. Paracelsus pointed out that the only difference was the amber. But these things are such total trash that even the cheapest junk you can buy is way better than them. Norah asked if following the recipe perfectly guaranteed she'd succeed, but she was told that the recipe doesn't even work for the second condition. This recipe shows him how to craft one specific item, and he can make as many as he wants in one go, but once he finishes the process, the instructions vanish forever. He crafts both bells at the exact same time, but since they can't be finished in a heartbeat, only the one done a split second earlier is the actual masterpiece. The next one turned out way better since he didn't just wing it, but he knew the real power wouldn't kick in until every single piece was finally in place. Our hero explains that for this alchemy item to work, every single tiny detail has to be 100% perfect. His signal bells were a total disaster since only one of them actually worked. They sounded super gross, and you couldn't see a thing through the tiny hole. She realized right then that even magic. Our guy explains they need to build a bomb, but she shuts him down instantly. He begs her to just hear him out for a second. After a quiet moment, she finally agrees to. Making this bomb was basically like a magic ritual, and since it was strong enough to blast their whole house into the sky, Norah told him to keep it far away from home. He tells her to chill because the bomb won't go off until he hooks up the detonator and types in the code, and since he followed the instructions exactly, there's no way it'll blow up by mistake. These bombs copy a wizard's magic the second they get a signal from the remote, which tells the control panel to force the elements to transform instantly. The air element right by the controls suddenly turns into gas, the bomb starts cracking, and once the team hits the fire element, the whole place just goes up in a massive explosion. Norah asks why the water element is even there, so he explains it's basically a safety switch. Whenever an outside order hits, the furthest center reacts first and turns the whole thing into water. She asked what would happen if the bomb blew up, and he told her the water would just vanish, the fire wouldn't even start, and the air would turn back to normal, so He explained they just pop a special cap on the wire to block the magic and finish the bomb, then asked if she was totally sure it was safe now. The MC explains that to keep the bomb business running smoothly, you have to follow the recipe perfectly so they don't draw too much attention, because staying low-key is the only way. Norah agreed and told him to rig the bomb so the blast would totally wreck the gem, and while he promised to get it done, she made sure he knew this was just a temporary fix until they found a better way. She asked how much power it would take to shatter the crystal, saying it'd be pointless for them both to die in the blast if the crystal didn't even break, so the guy told her he needed a second to think. He sets the crystal in the box facing the bomb and fixes a metal pin to the back wall, so when the shockwave hits, the wall gets shoved inward and the pin stabs right through. He stashed the box right in the danger zone so it wouldn't get in his way, and while he promised it was all safe, Norah could tell he was actually pretty hyped about it. She asked if he actually liked that bomb, and he said yeah, because imagining it blowing everything to bits made him feel weirdly light and satisfied. Norris thought he was acting shy because he was scared of the alchemists, but he just laughed and bragged that he still knows how to build a bomb. Suddenly, the doorbell rings and he shouts out to see if it's finally him, but it's just some random stranger standing there. Norah asks if the bell is for talking, but Paracelsus says it's actually a doorbell, and since he made 4 sets, he'll know the second a guest shows up. It was Totori, and he thanked him for remembering the Arlenbeck magic shop, but his super sharp hearing made the whole thing sound totally awful to him every single time. He introduces Norah and explains she just randomly showed up at his house, but Totori thinks a girl this gorgeous definitely needs a better outfit. Paracelsus tried to introduce the dude, but he totally cut him off to introduce himself, bragging that Paracelsus was actually one of his oldest customers. The last guy turned bright red, so Totori teased him about still being shy, reminding him how he got so flustered when they first met that he couldn't even say his own name without choking on it. Our guy starts saying he hates giving out his name, but Totori cuts him off to ask why they were summoned, so Paracelsus just says they're there to sell something. This thing was a straight-up magic bomb. The kid warned everyone it was super dangerous, even though it just sat there on the table looking totally harmless. Word is, the thing was perfectly balanced. Totori explains that because every piece is locked together so perfectly, it makes a sound that's way better than any bell you've ever heard. The guy explains that Paracelsus doesn't do negotiations and offers 90,000 zennies straight up, but our MC says he's got 20 more coming to bump that price to 100,000. Totori realized that if all 20 were this high quality, they'd make a killing, so he offered 95,000 for each one, and the MC and Norah just looked at each other, totally hyped. Paracelsus was just about to agree when Norah suddenly demanded 130,000, leaving Totori totally stunned and complaining that she wasn't even paying attention to the conversation. The guy says it'll cost 100,800 zennies, promising to deliver the materials over his next 2 visits and subtract that from the total. But he warns. Totori admitted he was actually hyped to work with them, so the MC shook his hand and said he felt the same before turning toward the girl. He mentioned his boss offers free training for servants since it's a normal thing, so if her master is down, she can pick up some awesome life skills and should definitely show up. Our hero says it's totally awesome, and even though the girl turns bright red, she acts like she's not interested, so Paracelsus finally lets her walk away. The author asked to take the bomb to show his boss, and after the MC agreed to pack it up, the kid bowed and thanked him like crazy. He turned back to Norah and explained that their group is all about looking out for each other, so she can always come to them if she ever runs into trouble. Totori laughed and asked if they were still cool, telling her he was just hyped she finally found a mentor she could actually count on. Right then, our hero bursts into the aquarium room and freaks out when he sees a massive boulder sitting there, immediately panicking about his missing gold while the spirit decides he's just dealing with a total scammer. Norah walks into the room and tells him to touch the top of the stone, but when she asks what he feels, he just says it's rough like any other rock. She tells him to check the hand he used to touch the stone, and when he looks down, he realizes it's totally soaked. Norah explains the aquarium is still there and it's all just a massive illusion. So when he asks if the spirit is really that OP, she says it only has these crazy powers on its own home turf. He explains that spirits are just leftover energy that clumps together, but nobody expected this one to be so insanely strong, and she's totally weirded out by his explanation. Norah thinks humans are just a mix of water, grass, and other living things. To her, there's basically no difference between a person and a spirit. But if he binds a spirit, our guy asks if she's actually a wizard since she knows way too much, so she bows and says sorry for hiding the truth, but he still wants to know why she kept it a secret. She said the merchant told her to keep her mouth shut because he thinks the witch is either a total monster or just a puppet being used by someone else. Norah realized he wasn't the guy she expected, so she finally opened up and asked if her magic freaked him out, even promising to quit for him. But he just looked at. He gave her a super genuine smile and asked if the spirit was actually close, and she was 100% sure it was right there. He asked if he should try praying, but she warned him that he'd probably just make the spirit angry since he's clueless, so he should just give a quick bow every time he walks past the well instead. Norah's face turned bright red as she asked why Paracelsus was giving her that sneaky grin, but he just said he was happy she finally opened up, even though she admitted heat. It was already pitch black outside. The whole house was basically in total darkness, and our main guy walks in asking what's going on. Norah said she just finished wiping down Koko Mochi's body, and when Paracelsus asked about the name, she totally started blushing. She says that in this language the word literally means child. It totally reminds her of the time she had to look after her little sister. It feels super disrespectful to call someone that. He agreed she needed a name Norah could actually say, so he went with Koko and promised they'd find her real name once she's back to normal. He kicks things off by rebuilding her skin since it's the easiest part to fix. It's super thin, so he won't need a ton of materials, and Norah totally agrees that starting. Our MC announces he's gonna slice skin off his own butt and grow it like a vegetable to make more, and just as the girl tries to stop him, Koko suddenly spreads her legs. Norah said if a dude grabs a girl's butt, she's totally gonna invite him over. The main guy turned so red, he didn't even know where to look. She told him to just take the chance, since they won't toss her out as long as she's useful, and she figured it might actually cheer her up, so she begged. Our guy breaks down in tears and asks Norah what to do since everything is falling apart, but she just tells him to step aside because she's taking over. Norah tells him it's time to look, but he just stands in the corner facing the wall with tears in his eyes, asking if she's finally done, and she just gives him a... He tried to apologize, but she told him they had bigger things to worry about once Koko woke up. Then she touched his back and revealed they were actually talking through their minds, which totally blew his mind. Talking to spirits is a huge deal for shamans, but they can also use this power on living people to make their voice vibrate right inside someone's soul just by touching them. He asks if she can hear him, but she just shrugs and says it looks like he's trying to send her a mental message, but she can't hear a single thing. Norah asks if you remember her saying elves are mostly made of spirit energy, but she warns you that this girl is totally different from the rest. If Koko really is a spirit, we might be able to reach out and talk to her while checking if her soul is doing okay, even if she's still technically alive. He tells her she's absolutely legendary, and she admits she tried to keep her shaman powers a secret, but the truth eventually came out anyway. Norah dropped to her knees by the bed, feeling her soul finally at peace as she reached out with her mind to see if he could hear her. She got 0 answers, so she finally got brave and asked to look into her own soul, but it was just pitch black and she couldn't see a single thing. She finally sees the curse inside her, and she's totally shocked to find a massive amount of gigantic chains. Our MC asks what's going on, and Norah explains it's a legit vow, revealing that Koko's soul is totally trapped by some insane curses that won't let her go. Paracelsus asked if this was the same magic as the servant pact, but she explained that even though it's a curse, the scale is so massive that they aren't even... A curse this insane wouldn't even work right if it covered your whole body. To get the contract magic going, they had to make a special place called the servants' room. Suddenly, Norah explains they're standing in the servants' quarters, which are actually creepy rooms made by stretching a servant's skin into another dimension, and apparently every single person here has... The hero was totally shocked by how that skin could stretch, but the girl explained that cracking the secret formula inside is the only way to finally understand this curse. Paracelsus wondered if the curse could reach people outside the room, and she confirmed it. This thing is so deadly it can easily take out any regular person. She taps her mark and starts shoving the walls apart, but when he spots something pitch black inside, she warns him it's a nasty curse he can never touch. Norah warned him that if she didn't make it back, he had to lock the door and call a shaman expert, right before she was swallowed up by a thick black mist. Once she gets in, she realizes it's a magical servant contract, but there's a hidden power buried even deeper that's tethered to Koko's soul, and she has no idea where it's coming from. That year, she was weighed down by massive cursed chains that banned her from talking, sleeping, or even taking a deep breath, and she was forced to stay sane while being forbidden from feeling joy. She's going to end up begging him for help, and even though her time is almost up, he forces her to stay alive while she regrets every mistake and shakes with fear day and night. Our hero shouts Norah's name the second he sees her. She begs him to stay back and not get any closer. You can already see the curse creeping onto her hand. She raises her hand as a dark cloud follows behind, and in a flash, the shadows wrap around her wrist and turn her whole arm jet black up to the elbow. Our guy asks if she's doing okay, and she explains that shamanic art actually started because people just couldn't stop cursing each other. She remembered how people always begged her to ruin someone's life just to satisfy their own selfish greed, but she finally realized that doing things that way was a total dead end. For the first time ever, the shamaness actually places a curse on herself. Everyone else is constantly throwing hate at each other, but she wants to be on a whole different level. To her, Norah was shaking with rage and crying her eyes out, knowing she could never forgive them for saying something so messed up. He rushed straight to her and begged for help, asking if she could break the sudden curse and wipe that nasty dark sludge off her hands. Norah says the only way to hold back the curse is to match its vibe and keep your cool, but for her, that's almost impossible. He asked her why she was struggling, and she kept it real, admitting she never thought things would actually go down like this. She was totally blown away by how much heart was packed into that promise, realizing right then that this was the real deal. The MC asks if she can still pull it off with those feelings in her heart, but she admits she's just way too angry to finish the job right now. Norah figured the curse was rigged to be impossible to break, but then Paracelsus suddenly started stripping off his jacket, leaving her totally shocked and wondering what he was up to. Our MC leans in and tells her to take her shirt off too, and even though she's totally shocked and asks why, she actually ends up listening to him. He laid down and pulled her close to his chest, admitting that being skin to skin like this made him feel something that was basically love. He asked her what she thought, and she warned him that touching the curse could make it jump right to him, but he just gave a little smile and said he'd rather take the hit than let her die. Norah looked him in the eye and said this was for the best, whispering the strange words, Koko Mihali, before explaining that the curse was already kicking in and he needed to back away from her immediately. The MC says the curse got deep into her mark, but Norah tells her it's not that easy to just delete, so she moved it to a safer spot to deal with it slowly. Paracelsus asks what she whispered while they were lying together, but she shuts him down, saying she didn't say a word and telling him to stop making stuff up, so he just apologizes. The sun is blazing on a brand new day as our guy and the girl chill at the table, and when she asks if that's actually a letter, he looks her right in the eye and he tells her that if his powers ever glitch, he'll write down exactly how they work, and if he suddenly blacks out, she just needs to keep him calm and let him read this letter. Norah asks why there are 3 letters, so he tells her to start with the first one because it's packed with his memories since he arrived, while the second one breaks down all his skills. By the 3rd letter, he was writing down every single detail about her so he wouldn't forget, and she straight up asked him why he was doing all that. Norah called him out, asking why he thinks his skills are still the best when her award just broke every record in the book, and he totally agreed. She told Tom it'd be a total disaster for her if he lost his powers, but then she just grinned and said she was kidding, because in a year she's going to be number bam. Paracelsus knew there was no point stressing over his lost skills, but he was actually pretty sad about forgetting everything, though the girl just smiled and told him not to worry about it at all. Norah was up first again, so it was finally his turn to make a move. He told everyone he was making a crystal to turn the spot into a safe zone, but right then, our MC thought it was way too early for the delivery, but when he swung the door open, a girl was standing right there, and they both just swapped a quick hello. She said she was hyped to meet him, introduced herself as Agnosia Dea from the Alchemical Association, and then asked if his name was seriously Paracelsus. He nodded, thinking about how stunning she was, while she brought up the elf girl he bought last week and asked if she was seriously injured. He rushed over to check on her. She apologized for showing up out of nowhere, and he invited her straight into the house. Norah was skeptical. They even had visitors. Paracelsus told her to go whip up some tea. Meanwhile, he let the guest know the elf was just hanging out on the 2nd floor. Agnosia was blown away by how much the elf had pulled off so fast, and she started wondering if she could actually use the elixir herself. She pointed out that he only pulled it off because he knew exactly what he was doing, calling it a massive win, and our hero totally started blushing. Agnosia asked why he wasn't spending his time or cash on her, wondering if he just saw her as a science experiment, but he told her he couldn't just ditch her and promised she'd be free the second she got better. The alchemist tells him he's a genuinely good guy, and since that's exactly who she respects most, she promised to always have his back no matter what kind of trouble he asks if she's actually a high-ranking alchemist, and she tells him there are only 3 masters in the guild, and she's the first girl in history to ever make the cut. He realized her power was on a totally different level than his, and Agnosia just laughed because she loved the compliment. So he asked how someone that strong ended up as a servant. She showed him a rock she found in the yard and admitted she keeps it on her just in case he tries to grab her. But he just stayed chill and promised he'd never do that. Agnosia explained that just like kids grow up and flowers bloom, even a regular rock can transform into straight-up gold. She admitted she only came to help him feel better, but now she's just relieved and asks him to look after her, so he promises to always have her back right as Norah calls them over for the tea party. Agnosia handed him these mysterious eyes of truth, which were created using alchemy specifically for this girl. The alchemist poured the tea and was hit with a crazy good smell she'd never experienced before, so Norah told her it actually came from her pet rodent and asked for her honest opinion. Agnosia absolutely loved the taste and asked if the girl really baked that nutcake herself, and when she nodded yes, the alchemists joked they'd hire her as their assistant in a heartbeat if she wasn't already with that guy. Right then, he asks her to tell him more about those eyes, but Ignatius just shrugs and says she totally forgot about them ages ago. These are the eyes of truth, and they let you see what everything is actually made of, even in pitch-black darkness. And if yours are powerful enough, you can even read people's minds. This is her ultimate creation that she's super proud of, and honestly, these eyes might be the sharpest ones in the whole world. These eyes are coated in thick primordial matter, so once they're popped in, she'll be seeing again in a week, though Paracelsus says she could have fixed her way faster. Ignatius tried to take the girl for himself, but he got shut down hard because the guy was determined to save her no matter what it took. The alchemist was hyped, saying she'd definitely surpass her old self because nothing is more important than leveling up. She reached out and snatched one of his eyes, saying it was hers now, and that he'd better make an even cooler one to match it himself. She turned back and told him to hit her up if things got messy, then she headed right out the door. Norah tried to say something, but he promised everything would be ready soon, and told her to follow him down to the basement to get things set up. Paracelsus asked if it was her first time there, and she told him it was. She couldn't help but notice the walls were covered in some weird, mysterious gunk. This keeps out sneaky spy fae and anyone trying to peek in with magic. But there's a catch. It can only soak up so much mana at once. You actually have to step out of. He shows her this crazy slug that eats sound to keep their secret, so they stop wasting time and get right to the point. Our guy finally admits he doesn't trust Agnosia one bit, and he even thinks she's the one who put a curse on Koko. She asked him what made him so sure, so he told her those eyes of truth were just way too perfect. The color, size, and weight, even the tiny veins inside, were a perfect match. Paracelsus wasn't buying it, insisting those eyes were definitely linked to the alchemy and that she'd planned to keep one for herself from the very start. Right then, Agnosia felt like he was taking way too long, and she had a weird gut feeling that he'd already figured everything out. She was totally confused why he didn't trust her, but he told her straight up that even though she said she'd help, she didn't lift a finger until he grabbed. Right when he bought Koko, she showed up at the house because she sensed the curse, and Norah realized that even if she didn't cast it herself, she was definitely in on the whole. She's 100% sure the alchemist is the one who cast the curse, especially since she smells exactly like the magic that hit Koko. Man, this perfume smells so crazy, and since she's never smelled anything like it in her life, she knows for a fact she isn't wrong. She linked up with Agnosia so she could strike at any second. And while your soul usually freaks out when meeting a shaman, this time it stayed totally quiet, because the curse was already hiding deep inside. He asked her again, and this time she finally explained that they'd become friends, and we all know you start changing when you're that close to someone. If you don't even know you're cursed, it can't get any stronger, but the moment you get close to Norah, who treats the curse like it's totally normal, your heart finally starts to feel its power. A tight bond makes casting curses way easier, so Paracelsus asked if they were actually that close and what was really going on with her hair. Norah admitted she was super sloppy for letting him see the second eye, and the guy agreed that he never would have suspected a thing if she'd just brought one. He's shouting for them to hurry up because he's sure Koko is the only one who should be putting that eye in. This girl is a total beast with insane power who could honestly wreck them all in a second, but he's sure she's got a good reason for acting so low-key. They're gonna help Koko while keeping her happy and staying safe, but if things get too sketchy, they're just gonna bolt. and Norah is totally down with that. Paracelsus felt like he was being a total coward, but the girl just shook her head and told him that wasn't true, because dying right now would be completely pointless. Norah asks what's going on, and he tells her he's freezing because his skin is ice cold, so when she offers him some tea, he just gives a quick nod. Our MC noticed the tea smelled super weird and found out it's called okipa, but since he remembered that's actually a tree, he asked if they really grow a ton of them around there. Nor warns them that this plant is toxic and will give you the runs if you eat it raw, but you can easily cancel out the poison with a different plant. He admits he's actually way more into it now, so she gets super hyped and tells him they can finally cook the dish, calling him over to the stove. She showed him this weird purple-green root and explained it's a crazy strong medicine, but it'll make you super sick unless you mix it with some ochapa. She grabs a ladle to cool the broth, and when he asks what that even means, she explains it's just pouring the soup into a different container. While the tea cools, she tosses in some ochapa leaves and ginger, maybe even adding stuff like pocote or UCO, while he just sits there wondering what those weird names even are. Once the broth cools down enough to touch, they carefully pour it right into the teapot. They sealed up the lid and the cave, and you've got to hold that burning cave and the picatacare tight while she says something to him in a language he doesn't even know. She suddenly realized she was speaking her native language and rushed to apologize, but the boy just told her it sounded super beautiful. She told him the tea was ready, and after one sniff, he knew it didn't just taste awesome, it was going to warm him right up. He flashes a big smile and tells her the food is fire and smells amazing, making her super happy, but then he totally catches her off guard by saying he finally knows exactly what she smells like. Norah asks if she really smells that bad, but he explains that when they're hugging and she's all sweaty, he picks up a totally unique scent he's never noticed before. That's when he realized it was the smell of the tea, and it actually smelled so incredible he couldn't get enough of it. But suddenly the girl snatched the cup right out. She told him she'd just bring some normal tea next time, but her face was turning bright red from pure embarrassment, leaving our MC totally stuck trying to figure out what the heck just happened. One guy starts talking trash to Norah, but his partner warns him the boss would totally lose it if he found out, though the first guy just shrugs it off as training and tells Norah. The second guy argues that servants belong to everyone and even the chief says the law protects them, but the first guy just snaps back that he doesn't care about the rules at all. Once the guys cleared out, Norah tried to stay calm, but she felt totally out of place until she suddenly heard her name and spotted a lock of hair that looked exactly like hers up ahead. She froze as she realized the truth. This man was actually her father. He apologized and told her he'd been searching for his daughter for a really long time. It turns out, Norah asked if he really cursed his own soul, worried that he'd never find peace and would just keep suffering, but he told her not to stress about it. She told him his death was a total waste because he just gave up, threw away his future, and forced himself into someone else's life, so he finally apologized. Norah asks if he's finally there to break her out, but her dad explains that a shaman can't actually curse themselves. He'd been totally weak and empty inside until this very moment. She says it doesn't change a thing, but he tells her he knows one clumsy girl who's actually an insanely talented charmer, and it's her. Norah admits that even with crazy powers, she still couldn't use them for herself, so her dad tells her she needs to start making some real connections. Like it or not, the people you're close to always change who you are, so if you're married, you basically carry a tiny version of your partner inside your heart. He told Norah she had to become a legendary shaman who could wake up the powers in everyone around her, just so she could make sure they all ended up cursing themselves. He told her to keep a close eye on them because now that she's in, she needs to find out what their rules are and then force them to break them no matter what. Norah asked how to make it happen, and her dad told her to believe in her dream with everything she's got, because once it comes true, nobody will ever be able to look down on her again. The next morning, these guys barge into her room to wake her up for class, but they're totally shocked to see her hair has grown super long overnight. Norah shouts that she's already grown up and asks one of the guys if he's even growing at all since his brain is smaller than her little brother's, making him start too. The guy rushed over and snatched the girl up, talking major trash to her face, but another dude jumped in to stop him because he was being way more aggressive than usual. Norah stood her ground, saying that servants belong to the whole city and can't be messed with, So anyone who breaks that rule is totally going to get punished. The guy asked if she was actually a shaman since things were getting way too real, and then she just turned to his friend and told him to get up. Her dad started hyping her up and saying she did an amazing job, but Norah told him to stop sticking up for her, wishing people would insult her even more just so her dad would feel the pain. The guy straight up asked if he could just watch his daughter suffer, and he didn't seem to care one bit about how much pain she was in. He took a massive hit, but he didn't think her move was supposed to be that deadly until Norah realized someone behind him was actually boosting the curse. Since this guy was linked to the first victim, it makes total sense the curse hit the person who broke the rules right in front of someone who cares about them, and now the dad is actually terrified. He noticed the guys were in such a rush they forgot to close the door, so he asked what the plan was and promised he could break her curse, but she told him straight up that she wasn't running away. Nor had no idea this country has super strict laws about talking to servants, but she's about to make these rules her whole life while stacking up a ton of cash on the way. The next morning, Nor heads back to the MC and asks what that random thing sitting on the table is even for. Paracelsus explains she's grabbing fire elements, and when she asks if they're for a massive magic bomb, he just nods and says, "Yep." He broke down how the bomb works. Once the fuel gets super hot and is right about to blow, it starts pulling in all the fire particles from the air like a magnet. This recipe is a total cheat code for new alchemists to grab a bunch of elements. But just remember that hot air always rises, so it's going to crash into the fire element no matter what you do. This recipe makes fire elements so insanely pure, they make the store-bought stuff look like total trash. But they won't even spark without a bit of air energy. So as long as you keep... Norah asked him what was going on, and he revealed he'd already ordered the bomb parts, but it was actually just a trick since beginners can't make high-quality explosives, and she asked if he'd get his money back, and he confidently told her yes, saying he'd handle the rest himself to make a massive profit while completely ignoring her offer to help. She's totally confused why the coin is burning up with no fire nearby, but the MC explains it's because its twin is being heated up all the way over at the Alchemy Guild. Norah finally figured out why the coin stayed warm even with the stove off, but then he asked if there was seriously no fire left in the whole house. Paracelsus apologized and explained that this is what happens when you buy a massive pile of bomb materials, but she just smiled and said they'd survive skipping dinner to save money. Our MC explained that fire was totally off limits for 3 days, so they'd have to eat out or somehow stay warm using just a coin. Check out Ellenbick's Magic Shop, where you can buy gear, get custom spells made just for you, and even grab a snack at the buffet on the first floor. Norah told Tutori to move out of the way, and while she was worried that cutting the bombs would hurt the heart, he promised the magic seal would keep them totally chill, leaving Tut. She points out that Tutori brought the bomb and tells everyone to check out the cut, which Tutori calls a total work of art. Though the giant bird thinks it's honestly way too beautiful for a weapon. Norah looked at Burks to see if he agreed, and Burks said it was way too perfect for any human to pull off. Tutori asked who could have actually made it, and everyone just knew it had to be the work of the adepts. Norah realized these guys were sketchy because Paracelsus's gear was either total trash or way too perfect, and even though he tried to play it off with some sloppy tricks, he totally blew his cover this time. She's pretty sure he's the one behind all those gifts. She needs to find out the truth right now. To do that, she's going to create a fairy. Mukugan. Mudrin heard someone was starving and went to check it out so the others could keep working, only to find Norah there asking for her lunch to go so she could bail. The lady says she's never seen her around, and Mudrin explains that since beast people work there, they don't serve any meat, but Norah looks totally annoyed and asks if they seriously only have herbs. Mudina tells her the first one is totally free, and she can keep it if she likes it, making Norah grin and say she's always down for a freebie. She sets down a bean burger and some veggie curry, and the smell hitting the air is honestly incredible. Let's make it even more teen narrator. Norah caught a whiff of that amazing smell and immediately dove in to take her first big bite. Her face turned bright red because she totally loved it, so she asked him to wrap it up to go while Mudrin thanked her for the pit. Norah was blown away that something without meat could taste this good, but the woman just smiled and said she made it specifically for meat lovers. She thanked her and asked if she knew the way to the Ellenbick Magic Shop. Mudrin told the hostess that a guy from Paracelsus's house had stopped by, and she got super hyped the second she heard the news. A few minutes later, Norah totally wiped out down the stairs, but when she asked if everyone was okay, she found out the floor was super soft and the stairs were actually hyped to meet her. The girl and the hostess swapped names, and even though the hostess bragged about knowing the MC, Norah didn't care and just mentioned that a rabbit told her everyone was meeting here to train. Norah told her she had insane luck and literally held everyone else's future in her hands. She straight up told Norah she's obsessed with money and will do anything to get rich, but since she falls for people so easily, she's actually the perfect match for Paracelsus. It's like they're totally meant to be. She tried to play a little game by guessing his personality based on his face and vibes, but when she asked if she nailed it, Norah told her she was way off. Before the lesson could even start, the lady was asked for a quick chat, so she just smiled at Mudron and admitted she really liked the girl and wanted to talk to her one-on-one. They eventually ended up in a new room where Norah noticed that anyone talking over a special tablecloth couldn't be overheard, and she bragged that she was the genius who actually invented it herself. Norah asked if she was using magic or alchemy, but the girl said she uses every trick she knows, right as she realized Norah was actually casting some super high-level shamanic spells. The master explains that science can create shields so tough that even mages can't get through. So Norah says she wants a tablecloth like that, and asks what it really takes to keep a secret. Norah wants her to sign a magic contract that forces them to keep this talk a secret, and stops them from hurting each other while the deal is active. I totally forgot that people in this country think shamanism is just magic, which drives her crazy, so she told her dad it was some weird curse since it looked so sketchy. She can't actually read the paper, but a curse lets her know exactly how it works, even if it's way weaker than a contract since it just messes with your head so you can't. The girl asked if the contracts were connected, and Norah held up a finger to show she was totally on the right track. The ties on this document are super weak, and if they snap, her copy will vanish too, making her think he just declared all-out war. Most likely, her own invention. Line 2. She agreed to sign the document but admitted that she could not write in the language of this country. Line 3. Norah asked if she'd been hitting the alchemy book since getting to Paracelsus, and when she smiled and said yes, the hostess was totally blown away by how much she actually knew. The lady complimented Norah's handwriting and said she really wanted her in the study group, so Norah asked what they even wanted to talk about. Norah mentioned that some people from another world showed up with insane powers, and the second the girl heard that, she completely stiffened up. She knew she was in deep trouble and had to act totally normal, while the host just kept going on about how people like her were basically walking presents. She only met 4 people the whole time, 2 brave adventurers, a merchant, and an alchemist, and they all had their own special skills and wild stories. She didn't even realize she needed to hide her feelings because she wasn't trying to play Paracelsus. She legit thought she was about to learn something huge. Norah turned to her assistant and explained that you'd need the skills of a mage or shaman to spot the weird stuff in the contract, because even though his skin and accent were sketchy, the language in the signature was the final proof she needed. The mistress knew that a shy genius and a practical shaman were a total power duo, and besides, shamans don't usually go around attacking every random person they see. She had to jump into action since she was already caught in a magic trap, knowing Norah would have done the exact same thing, all while wondering why Paracelsus was so... The mistress figured if she was in that girl's shoes, she'd be asking for some crazy magic power, especially since Norah could easily curse her, wipe her memory, or even end her life. She's got to watch her mouth because Norah warned her that only 1 in 4 people actually use their powers to help the world. She was down to just 2 thoughts. Stay on this lady's good side and bolt if things got ugly, since she'd already done everything she could to keep her master safe. She knew that if she ever turned against her master, she'd be dead in a second, since he held all the power and she couldn't even bring herself to fight back. Norah kept a close eye on the girl and noticed she was finally chilling out, probably trying to figure out her next move. The mistress figured this whole mess was definitely about a murder, so she stopped trying to run and hung on to every word, knowing that if she kept acting like a pushover, she was as good as dead. Norah warned them that these powers are way out of their league, and no matter what tricks they pull, she's not letting anyone treat the lords of gifts like criminals in this country. If the person who gets these powers turns out to be a total villain, their own gifts might actually turn around and kill them. Norah started wondering who even gets to decide what's right or wrong. and if she's really the one who has to judge everyone. The lady gave Norah a sweet smile but still shut her down. Then she grabbed the book and told her the court would make the final decision, leaving Norah totally speechless. Norah explains that these are the rules everyone in the country has to follow now. If you steal something, you're paying back 6 times what it's worth. But if you get caught stealing for the 3rd time, they're literally cutting your hand off. And if you take the lives of 3 or more people, you're facing the absolute worst death penalty there is. Servants belong to the people, and you can't just hurt them for no reason. And if you can't even give them a place to live, you're not allowed to buy them. Norn's big dream is for everyone to be totally equal, which is why she absolutely hates this law. She wants to get rid of the whole idea of servants for good. To her, she promised she still respects everyone's rights since they're a huge win after all the mistakes of the past, and she's going to do whatever it takes while the prayer is going down. Norn made it clear that gifts won't buy her favor, and since he killed 3 people in this country, he's getting the death penalty. Norah turned to Norn totally lost and asked what the plan was, while the girl in glasses just stared at the table, leaning on a massive book. Norton explained that her job was to track down people with powers and spy on them to see if they were breaking the law, and if they were using their gifts for crime, she was ready to strip their abilities away or even take them out for good. Norah tells her that lynching is a huge crime back home, and the Alchemist says it's the same for them, but she admits she's no hero because she just does whatever she. Norn set a scaly-looking book on the table right in the sunlight and told Norah that if she wanted to learn, she'd have to master their language and laws, because following those rules together is the only way they'll ever be real friends. The Alchemist makes it clear that if anyone tries to treat people's lives like toys, they're going to stop them. Mudrin points right at the wild-haired guy and says, it sounded super easy since she was already dying to go home, but the Alchemist warned that the second rule was going to be a total nightmare for the couple. Norn says that every couple of years, more and more gift-bearers keep appearing, which is a huge shock since Valians are usually super rare. But the Alchemists pointed out the world. These alchemists have been hunting for gifted kids for 10 whole years because the best magic users are usually super lucky or popular, so they're keeping a close eye on anyone who stands out. Norton explained that basically every gifted person just vanished or died before they even knew what they could do. Others ended up with brutal injuries that they never bounced back from. This whole situation was really starting to freak. Norah suddenly leaped out of her chair and demanded to know what was going on, warning that people with certain powers get kidnapped all the time since the authorities will lock up anyone who looks suspicious, leaving the... Norn crossed her arms and told them straight up that these creatures are called Reporas. Nor sat there thinking, wondering if they hunted Reapers too, and the Alchemist told her she was totally right. Nor realized that if the Reaper was working solo, he was basically a monster who had already wrecked 100 lives, and since nobody knew how he actually used those stolen powers, he was a way bigger threat than they ever imagined. Norah figured out that if they just followed the rules and let people keep an eye on them, the locals would leave them alone. And since these guys could help fight off the Reapers, the slaves stared at the girl and realized they had zero proof, and since they knew exactly how stealing powers worked, it meant they'd definitely done it before, making them just as scary. Norah looked down, realizing these guys might steal her and Celsius's powers just to beat the Reaper, so she stayed on high alert and tried to figure out her next move. Norah knew she wasn't a heavy hitter, but since the girl across from her looked just as weak, she wondered if she could catch the Alchemist off guard with a curse. Until this massive guy bursts into the room and shouts to see if anyone's there. Norah totally jumps, but Norn doesn't even look his way. Mudding greets the weird guest, who, Norah just sat there with a smile, telling the girl they should call it a day and save the rest of the questions for later, even though she probably wouldn't have the answers anyway. Mudrin tries to offer the guy dinner, but he totally snaps, demanding meat and telling her she smells like a literal animal. He says he only came for their top-tier herbs, so Norn just forces a smile and thanks him for the business. While he waited, the guy asked if they were hiring, but the Alchemist totally dodged the question from behind his desk, telling him to just hang on because the potions were almost finished. Norah was glued to the girl as she grabbed the plates with a long spatula, and it made the maid start wondering what it would be like to actually get in there and cook herself. A shepherd walks up and hands Norah a box wrapped in linen, telling her that her order is finally ready, and while she's thanking him, Modrina asks if she was totally caught off guard seeing the alchemist in the kitchen. As the alchemist poured the potion, Norah pointed out how weird it was to have separate rooms for alchemy, when it's basically just cooking with the same tools, and the guy just nodded because she was totally right. Mudirna explained that they aren't like basic shops that just sell normal gear, because they actually pump magic into everything they make. And right then, Norn was busy enchanting This total jerk tried to shut down Norn's cafeteria and turn it into a pharmacy just because he hated seeing beast men. But Norn fired back that the place was actually The thugs turned around and saw two girls staring them right in the face. The guest checked out the girls and said he totally got it. Then he tried to make her even madder by saying she was only good for cooking for slaves, but the alchemist shouted. Norn whipped her glove right into the guy's face and screamed that she was challenging the jerk to a duel. Norn points right at the guy and declares the fight won't stop until someone screams, "I give up," or gets knocked out cold. And since anything goes, he'd better be ready to apologize to their guest the second he loses. He raised his fist and said he wasn't kidding about a hit like that, and the other guy totally agreed. Norah stood up to say she wasn't mad, but Mudrin signaled for her to be quiet while she and Bandit stayed locked in a dead silent staring match without moving an inch. He tosses the glove back and accepts the fight, but with a crazy deal. If he wins, Norn becomes his slave to use however he wants until he's bored, and she catches it with total confidence. Norn asked to back up a bit, and after the guy gave her the okay, she slowly put some distance between them. He pointed his thumb at the beast and asked Norn to jump in so they could have a real fight, but she totally shut him down and insisted it had to stay a one-on-one. This thug had zero clue why the girl was backing away, thinking she was just some dummy who wanted to get embarrassed, while Megis was already pulling off two different types of magic at the same time. One line out, if the system counts sentences as lines, but the input is a paragraph block. Usually in these prompts, line refers to the entire block provided, but with the external method, you're basically sucking up mana from everything nearby and taking total control of it. This lets your spells get insanely strong, like zero limits, even if it takes The guy stood up, knowing from his years as a martial arts master that even a pro mage needs exactly 4 seconds to charge up and launch a basic fireball. This brutal fighter kept a close eye on his enemy, knowing he had to watch out for any weird magic or alchemy traps. He had no clue what kind of dangerous tool could even fit in Grinning, he hoped that even if she survived this hit, he'd still take the win and wouldn't be the one going down. This guy knew the deal. Once the spell hit, she'd be totally helpless, so he planned to rush in and punch her in the stomach to avoid messing up her face, and the second she reached out her hands, he made his move. The thug suddenly lunges and throws a punch, thinking she's about to pass out or puke from being so exhausted. Norn was a sorceress with one huge weakness. She just couldn't stay focused on anything. It was honestly a total miracle she even made it to the second rank of me. After going through so much pain, she finally gave in and decided to just focus on mastering those 3 specific spells. She kept reaching her hands out, soaking up all that floating mana with her whole body. Norah used her left hand to control the moisture and her right to mess with the heat, and while regular mages would think that's a tiny change, it's actually a massive deal for alchemy. Energy surged into her hands, turning ice cold and bone dry as it shifted into solid rock and started crushing together. Norn launched the stone forward, and even though the guy saw how fast and sharp it was, he just gave a cocky smirk because he thought it was way too weak to even bother dodging. This guy charges straight at Norn's stomach, and they're just inches away from slamming into each other. A bunch of sharp rocks stabbed right into the thug's hand, totally catching him off guard. The guy looked up and saw 100 sharp stones pointed right at his face. The guy was totally freaked out, unable to believe someone could cast a spell that fast. Blinding light suddenly filled every corner of the room. Since those basic materials were already set up, she started swirling ice and water together deep inside her. The guy charged back in, knowing that even with his injuries, his power had just hit a whole new level. Massive spheres of water. Norn pointed her hands right at the beast, and suddenly the ground exploded into a massive crater that sent him flying. The guy is face down in the mud trying to stand up, while his enemy tries to pull it together, hoping Norn is too busy with her spell so he can sneak in and she, frozen solid and stuck to the floor, The brute yelled at Norn, demanding to know how she could keep spamming spells and who she really was. She flashed a huge grin. Even while casting her spell, she told herself she was just adding new powers to it. The Norn let out a soft laugh, making the whole place feel warm, and suddenly the rocks just lift off the ground and start drifting forward. The stone sent the wind swirling into a massive vortex. The guy just stood there completely confused, not knowing what hit him. The girl knew this was her top-tier alchemy magic, and she wasn't. A massive explosion blew up right around the guy. The giant started screaming, and Norah watched the whole thing looking totally terrified. Nornsides is totally wiped out, but they're still wearing a huge grin and keeping the vibes high. Norn looked at the guy passed out on the floor and realized she totally overdid it, frantically asking if he was even still alive. But Modron checked on him and promised he was tough enough to pull through while Norah hid behind a flipped table in total panic. Norn told Norah she was totally confused because the loser clearly wasn't going to apologize, so she felt useless and headed home, realizing she and the owner would never be on the same. While Modron sweeps up after the fight, Norn lays out her cards and explains that the dragon shows the truth. The burning elf ancestor reveals the state of their souls, and that final. The girl pressed the card to her lips, totally lost in thought, while the alchemist's hand started glowing with a burst of magic. Grekov stretched and woke up covered in bandages on the floor, and as the guy next to him started to stir, Nor quickly apologized for going a little too hard during their duel. She stood up and told them she's a pro at healing, promising she'd be back on her feet in just 3 hours if they gave her some time. Grekov apologized for leaning on. She stared at him with total fear, convinced he'd end her the second he could move. But Grekov just looked confused and swore he'd never do that. Norn pulls on her gloves and warns him that even trying to kill someone gets you 3 years in prison, but the guy is totally confused, arguing he can't be punished for something he hasn't even done yet, especially since he has permission. Using his alchemy, he summons a glowing bow and a heart-tipped arrow right out of thin air. The girl gives him a freezing look and tells him she's about to pass judgment. The Norn pointed her weapon right at the guy and called him a sinner, begging him to just let her save him. Grekov told the girl to quit it, admitting that losing definitely ticked him off, but not enough to want a rematch. He hated how weak he felt in that moment. Right then, Norn just stares at him and starts laughing, saying she loves seeing a tough guy look so scared, and while Modron is still trying to figure out her weird taste, she suddenly fires an arrow straight into his chest. Grekov looked down at the arrow, then looked up with blurry eyes and realized the girl standing there was totally gorgeous. The guy in Banished actually started crying when Norn asked if Grekov would be her slave for 3 years, and even though he offered to serve her for his whole life, she just smiled. With a big smile, the girl put her bow away and promised to train him for 3 years before letting him go, while Modron just slid a book back onto the shelf. Check out Cupid's bow. It fires magic arrows that make enemies fall head over heels for whoever shot them, and while you can spam as many arrows as you want, the spell only works on... Norah finally got home, tossed her bag on the table, and shouted out that she was back. Paracelsus walked up to the girl with a tray and showed her what he had, making her super curious as she asked what it was. Wait, let's... The kid just shrugs and says it's Koko's skin, acting like the gross box is totally normal, while Paracelsus admits he's clueless, but says the skin started growing once he put it in a special DIY kit. Paracelsus was stoked to announce that Koko is super tough and will bounce back fast if everything goes right, but she's gonna need a ton of primal matter to fully recover. He looked at Norah and knew they had to figure out a way to put her back together right now. The elflay was just lying there totally still in bed when this creepy little monster with huge popping eyes sneaks in through the window and starts looking around. The monster was totally lost, but then elven hair coiled around its neck to choke it out while the girl just straight up swallowed it whole. High up in the dark night sky, an eagle was soaring right over the village. Burke looked down and saw Glint standing on his hind legs, actually giving signals to the beast man. The eagle landed and asked the dog how he was doing, and the pup just wagged his tail and barked back with pure joy. Burke sat right next to the dog to ask what went down, and since the pup couldn't talk, it actually started writing a letter. Puchko's note said the fairy girl was missing and probably kidnapped, plus the owner was working with some super shady people. When Burke asked about Mohutan, the dog just pointed its paw forward and let out a tiny squeak. The mole tunneled way down into the earth and gave its nose a quick twitch. Dory from Mogutan scanned the ground carefully, stretching his nose out into a bunch of thin tentacles. Burke chats with the Mogutan eagle in its own language, and it tells him about a super quiet basement where the walls actually drain your energy, making Burke realize the alchemist used this place to keep his secrets totally locked down. Burke told the beast squad to keep guarding the place, but since their noses are super sharp, they didn't have to stay awake all night. He just told them to hit him up on the radio if anything went wrong while the eagle headed back into the sky. Burke's zooming along the wall, praying his friends don't go too far, while the dog and mole are already tucked under their blankets and fast asleep in their den. Norah lay there next to Koko, realizing they couldn't fix her brain condition, and honestly, she didn't even know why she was doing any of this herself. The guy suddenly snapped her back to reality, asking if she was even listening, and Norah jumped up, asking him what she missed. Paracelsus admits he's not sure if it's healing magic, but then Koko's hair moves on its own and snatches a strand from the elf, leaving Norah totally shocked. The guy feels her hair and thinks she's just petting him, assuming she uses her hair like a bug's feelers to help her see since she's blind. The guy grabs a strand of her hair and gets totally hyped when he sees a bunch of dried-up bugs stuck in it, realizing she's been hunting small creatures to stay alive and can even move her hair on her own. The kid looked around in total shock and pointed out a tiny robot fairy spy hiding in her hair, making them realize they were being watched the whole time. Norn immediately started spiraling, thinking Agnoia was spying on them through Koko's eyes, or maybe even her own. The girl could feel Norton's massive thirst for blood, but the alchemist actually stuck to her own code. She never just executed people, she turned it into a public spectacle and always started a duel. If the maid could just figure out what makes Norn tick, she could totally control her or even turn her into an ally. But first, she had to get to class. Meanwhile, this guy was... That night, Norn met the shaman at a stranger's house and handed him a paper to seal a magical deal. He grabbed the papers and said that since she's a shaman expert, she can totally sign this deal on her own. Norn points out that only official or top-tier shamans are allowed to cast slavery spells, but the guy just laughs and tells her she's taking the rules way too seriously. When she asks if he'll actually do it, he says he'll take on any job and tells her to just bring the slave in already. The shaman just blasted Grekov with a crazy spell. A seal flashed right on Brutus's chest as he started prepping for a massive magic deal with the Norns. Once they're back home, the girl sits down facing away from Grek to talk to him, and Mudrin takes a seat right next to her. Without even looking up, she finally gave him his first order and treated him like a straight-up slave. Norn turned to the guy and straight-up ordered him to whip her 100 times with everything he had. Brekov's hands were shaking as he gripped his whip, bragging that Norn wouldn't survive 100 lashes, but she just looked down and told him that with Mudrin's insane healing skills, she'd make it through anything he threw at her. Norn explained that dueling without a judge is a massive crime worth 10 lashes, and if you're caught doing it again, the punishment gets 10 times more brutal. The guy wipes away his sweat and admits he can't go through with it because he loves her, but she just whispers that she knows, and that's exactly why they have to do this, so they can both feel the pain they were always meant to share. The Norn barked at him to hurry up and strike, so Grekov let out a heartbroken scream and swung his arm with total regret. A whip cracks through the room, and tucked away under the stairs, a rabbit man is shaking with fear. He pulls his knees tight and covers his ears, desperate to block out that terrifying sound. The sun was blazing as Paracelsus hyped everyone up, announcing they finally had all the gear and a safety fuse to start building the bomb. The guy asks Norah if she and Koko want to crash at the hotel tonight, and she's totally caught off guard by the sudden invite. Norah asks why he's doing this, and he tells her he's finishing the bomb alone, so no one else gets caught in the blast. She argues that staying by himself is even more dangerous. She suddenly plopped down on the floor and told him she was staying put, saying if he wanted to leave Koko at the hotel, he'd have to carry her there himself. Paracelsus was totally confused and begged her to stop acting like that, but she just turned her back, thinking he'd finally lost his cool. Norah was certain her master didn't care if he lived or died and was ready to build a bomb at any second, but the moment he saw her and Koko in trouble, he totally... Norah had a plan, and she knew right then that this was her one and only shot. Since her master is feeling super down and insecure, She decides to make him fall for her so she can finally hype him up to work harder and believe in himself. She started laughing like crazy because once her plan was done, all of Paracelsus's powers would be hers, while the boy finally unleashed his second ability. The guys grabbed the notebook, changed their gear, and masked up with scarves. The leader said it was time to move, warning that she could bolt at any second, and Norah was totally down. The girl just stared at the notebook, thinking back to Norin's warning that special powers can be stolen, when suddenly Norris lunged forward and snatched it right out of the boy's hands. Paracelsus stared at her with total curiosity as Norah's vision started getting all blurry. Norris spots an old guy with a massive beard sitting on a throne in a half-cloak, and he tells her that since she can hear him, it means she actually managed to steal someone's. He warned her to watch out if she tried to swipe those powers, because in just 3 seconds, the original owner would already be fighting to take them back. I had no clue this old man was the guy her mentor mentioned, but the second he said his name was Laos, she knew her hunch was 100% right. Elias pointed right at her, explaining that those thoughts were actually leftover memories from the stuff she stole. Then he pulled out a notebook with a guy's picture on it and started showing her exactly how to use it. Norah found out from Paracelsus's stories that the last person with this power was actually from another world, and somehow used 2 different abilities at once. He promised to reward her for taking her powers, and swore he'd give her a straight answer to any question she had. She didn't even ask who he was, even though he was pulling off moves her friends couldn't even dream of, and the guy just laughed it off. 1 line out. Asterisk. Input. 1. The old man began to disappear as if dissolving into the air, and said that he was the one who gifted people with magical abilities. Paracelsus waves his hand at the girl holding the sign to wake her up, and once she snaps out of it, she twists the magic artifact and tells the boy to try and reclaim his powers. Paracelsus grabbed the tablet and checked it out, but when Norah asked if he saw anything weird, he just shook his head and said he didn't see a thing. Norah admitted that the second the diary was gone, she felt a total rush of power and got super hooked. She told him that a spirit named Elias actually showed her how to use the artifact, and party. The kid was fuming that his notebook got swiped so easily, so after being told to stay on his toes, he asked to see what kind of crazy stuff they were building next. The storage was still totally full, so Norah asked her lady if she was making something, and she said she definitely was. The guy explained that the moment he dropped into this world, he went straight for the immortality recipe, but he quickly realized there were 100 ingredients he had absolutely no clue how to find. The kid felt totally useless staring at a notebook full of recipes he couldn't even use, realizing it was just a stack of trash paper. He decided to join an alchemist as an apprentice. Norah snatches the notebook back, but she says all the pictures have completely vanished. The girl explained that the notebook kept every recipe even with the new owner and still records every dish, while Norah shot the boy a dirty look that left him totally clueless. Norris realized his recipes were basically sitting ducks for any random thief, so he quickly apologized for being so reckless. She told him to keep that notebook low-key and hide it the second things got sketchy. Then she demanded they start training right after finishing the bomb, and Paracelsus was totally down for it. Norah told the guy to keep his mouth shut about his second power since Elias had already leaked the secret. She explains that if she'd only managed to snag his first power, he could have stopped her from getting the second one by hitting her fast enough, and if that power was actually lethal, Norah explained they had to keep their secret backup totally hidden since it's almost never used, making the enemy too scared to attack until the very last second. And once he got the point, she handed his notebook back. He got right back to work, saying he needed to build a bomb, and dropped to one knee to aim it straight at the runes. Paracelsus's workshop was a total mess, with rare artifacts just scattered all over the floor. He threw the window open, letting the fresh air swirl right into the magic floating above the circle. After that, he poured in the oil and stirred it until it was thick like clay. Then Paracelsus hooked up the control panel and molded it into a ball, just eyeballing the measurements, and, to wrap things up, he seals the orb with magic paper, and once it's thick enough, the first part of the job is finally done. The boy used a magic circle with a metal plate in the center to wipe out all the leftover junk. The moment he pulled the plate off, the magic seal died and everything returned to normal. Then he flipped the board, triggering a release circle that wiped out every single element on the table, and he had He did the whole process again using fire and water to make a magic-blocking shell, and even though he burned his hand a little, the bomb was finally ready to go. He asked her to pack the bomb, but they had to wrap it in special magic-blocking paper to keep things from getting dangerous while they moved it. He didn't stop for a second and kept cranking out more bombs, so Norah said she'd take them to the room and headed out. She noticed the news was nothing but bad vibes lately, and it was really starting to get her down. As she pushed forward, she wondered if Elias took their powers just to watch them struggle like bugs in a jar. Norah knew hiding wasn't an option, but she desperately wanted an escape plan since she knew the contract kept them safe for now, but she was still worried because she knew Norn, and the real problem was Elias getting bored enough to just snap and attack them. She wasted her turn on totally useless questions instead of trying to win, while the other girl was already busy setting up paper bombs covered in magic runes. Norah burst into Paracelsus's room shouting his name, and he answered her right away. She flashed a big smile and said that ever since meeting the spirit, she couldn't stop thinking about how awesome he looked and his totally unique way of seeing the world. The boy looked totally stressed when Norah told him Elias had secret moves and was actually sharing them with everyone. Paracelsus thought she'd totally lost it at first, but he quickly realized she had a secret plan, and the boy just chimed in saying he thought Elias was awesome too. She kept explaining because she thought the game would be totally boring if you couldn't see how it worked. She even had a theory that people just liked to watch. But the big mystery was, Norah realized that if she kept hyping up the spirit, he might actually give her something cool, so she kept the compliments coming while the guy just nodded along looking totally clueless. The kid stood up from his desk with a huge sigh, telling everyone they were done for the day and that someone from Ellenbick's workshop would be coming to grab the bombs tomorrow. Since they finished, Paracelsus wanted to see how Koko was doing, so he gave her a heads up that he was coming over. While hanging out in the elf's room, the boy noticed something super weird. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't actually looking at anything at all. Paracelsus didn't think agnosia would mess with the eyes, but he realized they'd be totally ruined if this kept going, while I just figured Koko was pushing them back. Norah wasn't about to trust the person who hurt her so much since she had no idea what that girl was really hiding, while the boy tried his best not to cry as he nervously asked her to go for a walk. The monster snatched the jelly right on Paracelsus Street, while the boy asked the girl if Elias had said anything else, but she told him she didn't know a thing. The kid shares his theory that if the spirit gives people power to fight, then his own strength should be used for battle too. But the older guy isn't buying it and totally doubts him, and the kid wondered if Elias had a totally different plan for everyone, but Norah just gave him a knowing smile. She asked how much of that catalog he actually remembered, but since he was in such a massive rush, he started second-guessing himself right before Norah asked him to explain his powers. The kid starts explaining 3 insane powers. First, he can read hearts to know exactly what people are thinking. Second, he's got a magic book filled with the world's strongest spells. And third, he can open a portal to a mirror world that only he can enter. The kid told her there was no way he could remember all that at once, and Norah totally got it. She warned him that even with tons of people having powers, someone is definitely going to try and steal his, so they better be ready to throw down. He was totally down to talk about it right away, and she smiled and agreed, but then she said they should actually go back to her room to finish the convo. Paracelsus got all embarrassed and said they'd definitely find a solution faster together, but Norah just joked that living with a mind reader is honestly a total pain. She told him she needed to sleep on it and they'd talk tomorrow, so she said goodnight and he said goodbye right back. Norah stood right by her bed and shut her eyes tight. Norah actually pulled it off, and the spirit was stunned because normal people usually black out, but she stayed totally awake. She had no clue that one day she'd be using this exact. The girl asks if they can read her thoughts in the astral plane, but her monster dad creeps up behind her and says he's not sure. All he knows is that if she stays still, she's dead. Norah says this is the exact moment for the beast to show up and asks it to take over her body, so Monster Dad totally gets it and agrees to make it happen. Monster Tato stared at his hands and the girl's body, complaining about how tough it is to have a physical form, while Norah's projection warned him to watch his mouth and told him to take over her body the second things got dangerous. Norah told them they had to get faster and smoother because that girl was already cooking up a new scheme, while the monster dad just had to act like his usual self to keep everyone relying on Norah says they're gonna totally scramble the mind reader's brain to catch him off guard, while the monster dad admits the girl's plan is actually genius, and the projection adds that this is the only way they're guaranteed to find him. Meanwhile, Paracelsus plopped down on the floor and started carefully checking out the recipe for making weapons. He knew basic weapons were trash against someone with real powers, but he still figured having something was way better than being empty-handed. Paracelsus just slumped to the floor, totally lost and with zero clue what to do next. The next morning, Norah starts drawing in the dirt and tells Paracelsus to do the total opposite of whatever she says. Then she sketches a circle and claims that spot as her own territory. Norah told him to stay back, secretly hoping he'd ignore her, and Paracelsus was so lost in his head that he stepped right into the circle anyway. She asks how he's doing, and he admits he feels totally gross for breaking into someone's house, but she just tells him that's exactly why he's cursed. Norah explained she set up a wicked curse circle to keep the enemies from getting inside. If anyone tries to enter, the curse shreds their mind and body, and it can even be deadly. Norah warns him that their enemies might actually be shamans, and promises to explain the curse later, and the guy is totally down with that. Paracelsus gave the girl a super confident look and called her by name, and she answered him right on the spot. He grabbed Norah's hands and swore he'd get way stronger just to keep her safe, making her blush and agree in a total daze, but their moment was cut short when some uninvited guests suddenly crashed the house. Mudrin showed up with a rabbit, and after Paracelsus and the beastmen said their hellos, Paracelsus told them he'd been waiting and already had the explosives ready to go. The rabbit's jaw dropped when he found out the master finished everything in only 2 weeks, but Paracelsus just laughed it off like it was no big deal. After checking out, the rabbit apologized for the delay and warned the kid he'd need 2 trips to carry all those bombs, but the spider told him to hold on while he went to talk to Norn. Paracelsus was already geared up and demanded his notebook right away. He quickly hid the notebook behind his back and told them it was the perfect size. Norah walks into the room and asks what kind of outfit she's looking at. He told them he remembered some high-grade fabric he'd been saving forever and decided to stitch together a suit to keep himself safe. The kid explains the suit doesn't actually track the heat and shares his secret rules for surviving the temperature, while Paracelsus hooks Norah up with her own gear, and even though the guy points to his chest and explains he made a mithril plate to guard his weak spot, with a secret notebook holder tucked underneath while Norah leans in to check it out. Norah asked why he even needed Norn, and Paracelsus said he wanted her to help hide who really made the product. She tells him to stay safe on the road, but he just flashes her a grin. Paracelsus grabbed the cart, totally catching Mudrin off guard, and asked the young guy if he was really hauling bombs, but the kid just grinned and said the heavy lifting wouldn't slow him down at all. Norah just stood there while that monster dad asked if she was seriously gonna let the kid walk away. Norah knew she was still totally useless and just wanted to prove her master didn't have what it takes to kill. But deep down, she was low-key terrified for him. Norah reached into her chest and yanked out a hair, and when the monster dad demanded to know who was responsible, she told him straight up that she did it to the Norns. The girl's face totally twisted in rage, and Nor calmly threatened to hide and drop a deadly curse on Norn if the boy didn't return, leaving the monster absolutely terrified. When Norah stood next to Paracelsus, her monster dad begged her not to switch out because he didn't know how to act, but she told him to stop complaining since he's literally part of her now. Right in the city square, Paracelsus stood by Phantom and started puking his guts out, gasping that he'd never moved this much in his life, while Mudrins rushed over to hold him up before he could collapse. The rabbit was totally ready to ditch the kid, but Mudrina stepped in and said they had to look after him. He was totally out of breath and realized his stamina was trash, but then a voice called out and Parcells snapped his head forward to listen. As the fountain starts glitching out, a skull suddenly pops up, proving the kid actually has some insane powers. Paracelsus was freaking out and about to scream, but suddenly something yanked him right under the water. The rabbit heard the noise, hopped over to the fountain, and asked Paracelsus what he was even doing. While the rabbit checked out the fountain, Mudrin asked what was up and learned someone heard a splash, but the guy who made it had completely vanished. Mudrin told the rabbit to back up a bit, dipped her finger in the water, and then carefully licked the drop off. She calmly told him it tasted like a dead human, and when the rabbit asked if it was Paracelsus, Mudrin explained the person it belonged to died days ago, Then Mudrin knew if anything happened to that guy, Norah would go totally ballistic on them, so she quickly typed a warning on her tablet that Paracelsus was missing. Paracelsus is sprawled out on the ground, and this mysterious shadowy figure is standing right over him. This skinny, creepy-looking guy calling himself the Dark Knight grabbed his sword and told the kid he better start answering every single question. Paracelsus stared at the guy in the cloak, and he was absolutely terrified. Dark Knight realized the kid was packing powers from another world, and the boy totally admitted it. The guy points his sword right at Paracelsus, demanding he show his powers and give them up to stay alive, while Paracelsus just scans the area to figure out his next move. He was totally spacing out when he fell into the fountain, but when he looked up, the crowd was gone, and it was dead silent. He'd just been sent to a whole new world. The night duck just laughed, and that's when Paracelsus realized all that swirling water was just a small taste of the insane power this guy was actually hiding. Paracelsus realized one of the Dark Knight's powers wasn't even for fighting, and he started wondering if it could be stacked with other skills, or what this crazy movement ability actually did. The kid asked if he'd actually make it back alive if he gave up his powers, but the guy just smirked and told him there's no guarantee. It was a totally crazy thing to even ask. The Dark Knight told the kid that if he wanted to stay alive, he needed to ditch his powers right now, adding that he'd be watching his every move before making a final choice. The kid was shaking with fear, yelling that he didn't know this guy and wanted to go home or he'd burn him to a crisp, but the Dark Knight just told him his real power was actually in his recipes. Paracelsus was totally floored by how much his enemy knew and had no idea where he got all that crazy info. Night Duck brought up how the boy worked so hard making medicine for his sick grandma. Then he casually pulled out a notebook to show he wasn't hiding anything. The guy starts poking him with his sword, mocking him for not being able to turn him into charcoal and demanding to know his second power while Paracelsus just covers his head to shield himself from the hits. He gripped the sword tight and shouted that he wasn't giving up his power, but he was down to make a deal instead. Paracelsus said they should do everything possible for the kid, just as long as nobody else gets hurt. He begged them to get him out of there fast, because if he dies now, the bad guys won't gain a single thing. Night Duck laughs in his face, asking if he's finally ready to die, as he summons a massive army of zombies straight out of the ground. He spins around and totally freaks out when he sees a massive swarm of zombies right behind him. Those rebels tried to snatch him up, but he fought back like crazy to shove them away. A horde of zombies tackled the kid and swarmed him, and as he screamed that he was dying, the man just said they were only playing with him for now. The Dark Knight warned him that if he didn't start listening, he was going to get a serious beatdown. Paracelsus stood up the second the army stopped, and the enemy demanded they hand over every single one of their powers. Crying his eyes out, the kid promised to do exactly what he said. The guy ordered him to take the notebook, but he just coolly said it was already in his pocket and held out a coin to pay for it. The Dark Knight asks what the heck it is, so the kid pulls out a magnet and explains it's the special communicator everyone gets when they join the Alchemists Association. He slammed her onto the plywood and bragged about his moves, making the other guy ask what he was going to do next. The coin splashed into the water, and as the boy leaned down to whisper "pair," everyone around him instantly froze like they were just cardboard cutouts. Out of nowhere, the fountain just totally blew up. He ducked just in time, so while everyone else got sent flying, he was the only one who didn't get hurt. Paracelsus just casually leaned on the fountain while everyone else and even the water drops slammed into the ground. Paracelsus jumped up from his seat, totally blown away that the recipe actually worked to turn water and valerian straight into vapor. Our guy sneaks forward, thinking the Dark Knight is going easy on him, but he actually ends up taking the knight down and starts praying he's still alive, because if the knight dies... The kid slammed into the ground, totally dazed by the blast and feeling his head spin. Norah was right in the middle of dinner when the doorbell suddenly rang, and it turns out some totally uninvited guests had just shown up. She swung the door open, thinking Paracelsus probably just forgot something. Lexus stepped right in front of Norah to shield her, flashed a big grin, and told her to have a great day. Norah just froze right there, looking like she was in a total trance. She quietly ordered her monster dad to transform and headed into the spirit world to do some shopping, totally clueless that Elias was about to show up so soon. The girl already told her dad about a mind reader, but she said they can only see the basic thoughts floating on the surface of someone's mind. The monster dad asks why she thinks that, and she explains that if they don't, the reader will just strike first and ruin the whole game for Elias. Norah realized the spirit was a total sucker for compliments and would probably show up soon, so she started overthinking her master plan to outsmart the old man. But her dad was losing it because Norah begged her dad to stop focusing on the bad and just see the good in Elias. Norah was so hyped to find out how strong the old man really was that her dad got totally confused and asked if she was actually trying to kill him. She says it's just one choice, but they gotta figure out what he actually meant before they make his words sound better, so her dad shouldn't even sweat it. She tells him they'll swap the second he gets distracted, but the dad asks what he's supposed to do if his son wants to stay the night. She told him to hold off on that offer and flex his worth first, because if he plays it cool and waits, he'll eventually be the one calling all the shots. This monster dad was losing his mind because he had to share a pastel with a ghost. The girl told him that getting close would help them bond and find the enemy's weak spots. Norah told him that even if he's innocent, his weakness is going to get his daughter killed, and then his current problems won't mean a thing. Back in the present, the dad, who's still in his daughter's body, gave Elias a super polite greeting just like he was supposed to. The girl was totally shocked and asked Elias what he was even doing in a place like this. Elias told her he had some free time and decided to swing by, asking if she was shocked to see him, and when her dad admitted he was actually hyped for the surprise visit, Elias just let out a big laugh. She backed away from the door, told them she was helping with the tea, and invited everyone inside. Norah used her mental powers to force her dad to be super nice to the old guy, and even though he looked totally miserable, he put on a fake smile and agreed. Inside Alan Bix's magic shop, Norn tells everyone that Porchico spotted a zombie near Paracelsus's house, holding a piece of flesh wrapped in cloth. She carefully unrolled the canvas right by the dead guy's hand and explained it was actually a piece of his body. Then Mudrin asked if there was any way to control the dead. Norn says the move is real, but it's super hard to pull off because people keep messing it up without even knowing. And get this, it's actually a forbidden curse. She looks at Norton's hand and realizes that magic is way harder to use in crowded cities, making it a super rare skill, so if Paracelsus ended up there, She snapped at Zerman to stop tailing her and go hunt down everyone except Colic, and Barrow was ready to make it happen. Norn was seriously stressing out thinking about Paracelsus. Paracelsus was slumped over right next to the fountain that was totally smashed to pieces. Finally snapping back to reality, the guy wipes the dirt off his face and tries to stand up. The kid spots the Dark Knight nearby and is totally shocked the guy forgot his own powers, but then something suddenly snatches him by the leg. Paracelsus dodged the zombie's grab again, and the Dark Knight stood up with the undead, yelling that I'd totally ruined the collection of bodies he spent so long gathering. The guy glared at the kid and told him straight up that he'd never forgive him. Dark Knight ordered them to rip the hero's leg right off, and Paracelsus was so terrified he started shaking like crazy. That zombie's head was sitting right there, just inches away from the guy's foot. Suddenly, the dead skull burst into flames, and the kid was totally shocked. Two girls behind the house looked super worried and waved the guy over to make sure he was all right. Paracelsus was crawling toward them, but the second the Dark Knight sent the zombies after him, he jumped up and bolted. One girl starts firing off spells while the other gets ready to hold back the mob, and then the mage just lobs a fireball right at the zombie. The fireball blew up in size, got super strong, and blasted straight ahead. The ball exploded and totally wiped out the zombie standing right next to the main villain. The three friends are hauling it out of there, and when the boy tries to look back, the girl with the sword and shield screams at him to stop stalling and just keep moving. She stood her ground against the zombie with her sword, then used every bit of her strength to shove it back and drive the blade right through it. The boys bolted, and Paracelsus decided he was going to find out exactly who they were. The kid tried to ask a question, but he was shut down fast as the Dark Knight suddenly shouted from right behind him. The guy screamed that they'd never escape without him, and just like that, he knew he'd already won. The squad races for the castle, and even though Paracelsus is totally gassed and wiping sweat from his face, he keeps it together so he doesn't fall behind his friends. The guy shouts out a warning spell and the whole sky lights up, making the girls cheer that they're finally back as they start dropping the ladder down to them. She yelled at him to get up and run, and while he made his escape, she stayed behind to hold off the massive wave of zombies all by herself. Our MC walks up to two girls, catching one right as she's aiming at a zombie, and they both freak out when he greets them. The short-haired blonde leads him toward the door while her friend starts yelling at the top of her lungs for everyone else to wake up. Paracelsus and the girls headed down the stairs, keeping their eyes peeled, while the boys snuck into the hallway and crept forward without making a single sound. The witch introduces herself as Goldie, bragging about being a genius sorceress, so Paracelsus shakes her hand before Goldie points out her knight, Sylvia, who smiles and says she used to be just a regular jobless girl from the city. The magician stepped up and introduced the squad, naming the shooters Violet and Rose and the others Lily and Dahlia, then explained that while the group is actually bigger, only these 6 are ready to fight. Goldie spills the truth that they were kidnapped for the Dark Knight's dream, and when Paracelsus asks what it is, she says the man is dreaming of a heron. Goldie gets her energy back and tells him he made a huge mistake picking her after he tried to wash off her makeup last week, bragging about how strong and pretty she is while he rants about her not having a wizard's magic seal. Goldie was left wondering how the guy just vanished and what he was actually plotting with the Dark Knight. Goldie demanded the truth while her knight whipped out his sword and pointed it right at the kid. Right at the edge of the blade, the kid shouts that a spirit gave him 2 gifts, while the Dark Knight brags about his own strength and tries to steal them. The kid was acting super shady because he was terrified of the girls, but Sylvia warned that letting him live would only make the Dark Knight more powerful, so she suggested finishing him off right then and there, making the guy back away in total fear. Goldie thinks it totally happened, but with that guy's insane powers, he probably wiped them out solo just to get more in sync with his abilities. Paracelsus told them he wasn't the enemy and promised to help take down the Dark Knight if they teamed up, while Sylvie kept a super close eye on everything. Sylvia stomps right on the guy's chest and slams him with her shield. Paracelsus is flat on the ground, and with her sword pointed right at him, the girl demands to know who he thinks he is. Sylvia says they've survived this nightmare for a whole year thanks to the locals and the people who died for them, literally stepping on this kid to keep going. The girl freaked out and asked how he's supposed to help when he just got saved from zombies himself, and after the boy apologized, Sylvia just lowered her sword and walked away without a word. Goldie says sorry to Paracelsus and asks how he survived that pitch-black night, so he just wipes the blood off his face and tells her that combining his 2 powers was the only way he found an escape. Goldie tried to get him to spill the beans on his second power, but he wasn't budging since it was his ultimate trump card, and when she asked again, he straight up told her he'd rather fight the zombies solo than reveal his secret just to join their team. She accepts the situation and suggests they team up, promising to bring him food herself so he doesn't have to risk the 2nd floor while he's still being watched. Paracelsus didn't say a single word, just watching as the girl quietly walked off. Once it got dark, he sat on a bench thinking about all the lies he told for the right reasons. And then it hit him. If he died and got buried anywhere, he thought he was totally done for and regretted all those lies. But as he gripped his head in panic, a vision of Norah appeared to tell him he did the right thing, making him. The guy jumped back in total shock, but she told him to shut up and explained she's actually just a part of his imagination. She said she only looked like this because of the real Norah, so the boy thanked her and asked how she was doing, but she just told him she only knows what her master knows. Paracelsus looked up at the sky, just hoping that Norah was doing okay. Meanwhile, the girl was at home, shaking with fear, naked and bloody, quietly crying. Just a few hours before the big fight, the rabbit zipped through the back alleys and rushed straight to Paracelsus's house. The rabbit was totally confused why he was still running to find the kid's house, because based on his math, he should have been there ages ago. Elias started flexing his crazy powers to the girl, bragging about his unbreakable deals and a beam that can vaporize anything. Then he just smirked and asked if there was anything even stronger than him. The guy explains that when 2 fighters are perfectly matched, the battle gets super intense. He admitted that pushing himself to the limit just to win was actually a total rush, even though the girl tried to. Norah watched the projection and saw the old man had been talking for a full hour. And even though her dad was totally locked in, she knew she'd never have the patience to sit through all 6 stories like that. The girl realized her plan to give powers to people from another world and bring in aliens was a total win, and Norah, wanting to impress Elias, was quick to agree. She tells him they didn't invent magic, but Elias is the one who let them use it since he's the father of all things magical, and Elias is totally moved because she knew. He explained that stuff like fear and rules are just holding everyone back, especially since he originally gave people infinite magic to create or trash entire worlds however they wanted. Elias felt pretty down about how annoying people can be, and just wished there were more epic battles in the world. The girl asked Elias if he knew about curse magic, since she's a shaman who thinks they're different from regular magic. But he just smirked and called it a role-playing game with a bunch of silly rules. Kurz was talking so much trash that Norah's dad totally snapped and challenged the spirit to a straight-up duel. This guy was staring at the girl with total curiosity, while a hidden projection watched everything from the shadows. She told him his spirit was totally insane, and that a normal person like her couldn't even touch his level. While inside Norah's body, the dad explained he wanted to prove curses aren't weak, and can actually be just as powerful as any human. She told him he could hit her if he really wanted, but he had to ask for permission first. Ali asked what she wanted for her big win, but she just smiled and said a little praise was enough, making him burst out laughing. Norris was totally blown away by how her dad kept his cool and flipped the whole situation to his advantage. They didn't even realize they had a real shot at surviving and finally getting rid of that spirit, but he was totally blown away by how the adults had backstabbed them. He agreed to her deal, but warned that if she failed, she'd have to listen to him yap forever as he threw up a shield to protect himself. Elias warned that this barrier is a total fortress and won't let a single thing through until it decides to open up. The guy points his fingers as they start glowing bright, warning her that it's a ray weapon and he'll blast her into ashes if she doesn't surrender right now. She didn't even flinch and just accepted her new reality. She asked who'd even listen to him if he burned her to ash, and right then, he realized he'd totally messed up. The spirit switched things up and said it's using needle number 43 to pump out magic for a full 24 hours, making even the strongest curses totally useless. The girl backed away in total terror, asking what kind of insane power this was, but Elias just coldly told her that trying to escape through a needle was completely useless. The needle slammed right into the girl's chest. The girl crashed off her chair in pain, but Elias just laughed and told her he'd already won while giving her a big smile. The guy was super nervous and asked if she was in pain, but she just sat down and started cracking up at him. Trapped in Norah's body, the dad explained that they just shared some tea he made, talked for hours, and then agreed to a duel, which is how they finally bonded. The needle stabs Elias right in the chest, and the guy is totally shocked because he thought those charms on the ceiling would block the hit. The guys were totally lost on how she pulled off his move, thinking she must have hit him first, but she dropped a truth bomb. She only lent him the power, and he was. She figured the curse wouldn't touch Elias since he doesn't have a real body, but she's catching major feelings for him even though she's still totally freaked out. She explained that he was low-key terrified of her curse, so he panicked and used the ceiling's power to shut her down. That made him totally predictable, giving her the perfect. She points right at Elias and tells him that needle is stuck for good unless he can break the spell, mocking him by saying his infinite magic is actually a joke. His dad explained that the ray and barrier are insane powers, just like the skill that grants other abilities, and you could tell the guy was really starting to freak out. His dad promised those 3 skills were way more than enough to get things done, telling Norah he'd handle the enemy himself, so there was nothing to worry about. She explained Elias' dark belief that humans are just pathetic weaklings who waste their true power and are born to rot, leaving the man absolutely paralyzed with fear. Out of nowhere, she turns all dark and cursed-looking, glares at the guy, and asks him what he's even gonna do now. She drops into a fighting stance and gets ready to leap, while the guy is hyped that his powers are finally ready to go, even though she's totally confused about why her body looks so different. Elias whipped a knife out from under his robe and tried to slash the girl right as she was jumping. Suddenly, Norah's clothes just vanish and she's stuck right against the ceiling, leaving her husband totally shocked as he tells her she really shouldn't jump that high. The girl slowly twisted her head 120 degrees toward the guy, trying to freak him out and catch him totally off guard. The girl actually had a second eye, and even though the guy's attack bounced right back at him, he didn't even flinch and went straight for her again. Her curse reflects every. Norah dodged the hit and realized he couldn't use his new magic with that needle, so she tried to force him to use his old powers before her time ran out, knowing that as soon as she grabs the item, that same guy from the notebook incident pops up again and tells her straight up that this is exactly how she's going to die. Norah begged the projection to send her back faster, so the guy cut the timer to just 1 second while she dove behind the fireplace, realizing that if he wasn't actually seeing things, the herbs she mixed into the tea and that burning incense finally showed the guy the secret trick she uses to stay hidden. Norah didn't think her plan would actually work, but with that needle finally weakening, Elias gave her a real opening, and she wasn't about to quit now. Norah knew this spirit was way older than humans, but it was just a parasite that ruined everything it touched, so she decided to finish the job and kill her husband. Norah clocks the guy right in the jaw, silently apologizing to her dad for dragging him into the fight while begging for a bit more power. Her dad's spirit tells her not to worry because the clone charged like a total maniac and slashed the spirit's face, but the guy managed to strike back with a huge sword swing. The old guy cheered because he finally landed a hit, blowing off the clone's right arm and leaving a massive gash on his chest. But he was totally stunned when the partner yelled to Norah. Norm reached out and grabbed Elias's hand with a super tight grip. She whipped her hand out and drove the blade right into the guy's chest, making him let out a massive sigh. The girl asked her dad to go into her servant's room, which totally confused him. And right as he was questioning her, the spirit broke through her seal. Norah yanked her hair away from her dad and stepped into the massive room, but a voice in her head screamed a warning. "Whatever you do, don't touch the slave's curse." The opening showed the walls were actually made of skin covered in cuts, and while she hoped this clue was enough, she just nodded when her dad asked if she was doing okay. Norah asked if he could actually master this skill, and his dad just gave a confident, "Yep," before jumping straight into the skin. Suddenly, a shadow appears in the tunnel, and Norah tells her dad she's hiding supplies nearby, so he has a safe spot to duck into once the fight starts. And even though Norah grabs the sword again and gets warped into a guy's projection, but the spirit says he's too busy and kicks her out right away. The girl finally makes it back, and while her dad's telling her to stay safe, you tell her she's got to ditch that sandal too, right next to the enemy lying there with a massive hole in his chest. Norris let his sword rip through the air. Elias is complaining that his legs are killing him, but his dad just stays chill and asks Norah if she's going to cut him again, and she says she might have to do it one more time just to be safe. The girl straight up sliced the guy into 5 separate pieces. Totally exhausted and gasping for air, Norah slumped down next to Elias and grabbed his head. She started chanting a spell to keep his soul from turning into a monster, but all she really cared about was getting rid of the body as fast as possible. Norah tried her best to relax, but her dad's words kept looping in her head. No killer would hide someone that fast, and now sleep was totally out of the question. Even with his head chopped off and totally mangled, the old guy kept talking, stubbornly shouting that he wasn't going to sleep. She backed away while the guy kept talking about how much he hates sleeping because he might miss something cool, and Norah totally freaked out when she saw the talking head. The old man just grinned and said he hates being told what to do, told the girl she did an awesome job, and then suddenly sliced his own throat as a spirit threw up a massive barrier around them. The guy just smirks and corrects her, saying he's only used those 3 skills for 100 years, but honestly, 2 are more than enough as he summons a secret cheat menu and The old guy finally gets back on his feet, but then 4 tentacles sprout out of his head and he reveals there's a secret restoration device in the cheat catalog. This power lets the spirit rebuild its body while a weird puppet doll appears right in its core. The girl was totally petrified when he casually told her that his magic power was basically infinite compared to a normal human. The spirit jumped back into its body and suddenly grew 3 times bigger than the girl, bragging that it could pull off crazy transformations too. The guy told her he'd cleared the path and even offered to let her hit first, but Norah knew right then that she was totally cooked and had no way to win. Norah realized that even if she stabbed him, he'd just heal instantly, and if she failed, both she and her dad were dead meat. Her father apologized for being too weak. The guy was totally frustrated and asked if she'd really just thrown it all away, telling her that nothing could change now as he waved her off for the last time. Out of nowhere, a rabbit jumps in to save the girl, bounces off the ceiling, and slams right into the guy. The rabbit smacked the enemy right in the face, and the girl was totally caught off guard. Norah was blanking on the rabbit's name, but the bunny cut in and said he's Tutori, admitting he'd been listening from a distance and asking what that. Norah explains to the rabbit that nothing gets past that barrier unless the guy wants it to. Even if the shield gets a tiny scratch, the device on his chest repairs it instantly. Then, he wiped his face and stood right up to the beast man, telling him the whole mess was just a basic alchemy mistake humans make all the time. The bad guy points at the rabbit and asks how it isn't ashamed to be alive, since it's just a gross mix of the worst parts of humans and animals. He keeps saying how disgusting. The rabbit swore the Alan Vick shop wasn't the enemy, and he was ready to die just to prove it and get her out of there safely. The villain mocked his shaking legs and told him to stop acting human, since it's totally normal for a weak herbivore to be terrified of a predator. He figured a grass-e. Totori calls himself a total failure because he can't even get shot, so Elias fires off another beam to try and blast the rabbit. The enemy kept blasting that beam while the rabbit hopped around, feeling his strength fade and knowing his chances of winning were basically zero. The guy noticed the rabbit was zooming and asked if it was in a rush, while the beast man was busy bouncing around the room with pure joy. Totori remembered Norm Ko saying beastmen have insane powers that regular people and animals don't, and he finally felt that energy surge when he was terrified during a fight with a super strong enemy. Tater was totally freaking out, and the only thing on his mind was finding a way to escape. The bunny stopped hopping and started silently closing in to surround the enemy. The rabbit was totally hyped about his special powers and thanked the alchemists for making him this way. But Norn told him it's actually a super rare gift that only a few people even have. In the middle of the fight, the rabbit totally freaked out and started moving at an insane speed. The tutor screamed at the monster to get its attention and show off their insane power. The villain just laughs and says he's unbeatable because no matter how fast you strike, his barrier is way too strong for anyone to break through. The guy tried to say something, but the rabbit suddenly smashed through the barrier and used a spirit's hand to punch him so hard in the face that he actually lost an eye. The enemies were totally blown away by how sneaky those beastmen could be. She saw his body starting to heal and realized that just cutting off his head wasn't going to be enough to stop him anymore. Norah screamed at Totori to aim right for the body, hyping him up and promising that he totally had this. The beastman ripped the guy's heart right out, taking the magic artifact hidden inside with it. The girls crushed the fight and finally walked away with that sword. I swung fast and sliced right through the heart and that magic item in one go. She really wanted that monster dead, so she just waved her hand and made the artifact vanish. Our heroes collapsed to the floor, totally wiped out and drenched in sweat, while the whole room lay in absolute ruins around them. She scrambled to her feet, walked right up to the beast, and asked him if he was doing okay. Out of nowhere, a bright beam zapped Norah's arm from behind, and she whipped around to see what the heck just hit her. She completely lost all hope the second she saw the total nightmare right in front of her. The guy's body had totally transformed, and he bragged that he doesn't even need the artifact to stay alive because he's straight up immortal. Lord landed a nasty hit on Nori, and as she collapsed to the floor in total pain, her vision started fading while the whole world felt cold and distant. The monster let out a massive roar, yelling that the girl couldn't use her magic arrows anymore. And even though he was totally panicking and couldn't think straight, he decided to just charge in and start biting everyone before taking a quick nap. Norah's dad screams at her to move faster, but he suddenly freezes in terror as splinters start raining down from the ceiling, signaling that something really bad is about to go down. Koko had turned into a total monster, ready to go wild on her enemies while keeping the people who love her safe. Her eyes flared up like fire as she pushed past her limits, launching her hair straight through Hermes's chest and stabbing him clean through. Just as her strength totally gave out, she plummeted from the ceiling and blacked out before she even hit the ground. Her dad realized this wasn't some basic curse, but her own bottled-up rage forcing her body to keep moving forward no matter what got in her way. Out of nowhere, the cup slides off the table, flies through the air, and slams onto the floor with a loud crash, leaving a huge crack right on the edge. When the maid asked if anything big happened, Agnozia just said she only has one real friend, which made the maid realize how lonely and miserable that girl actually is. This lady thinks she's way too soft because she keeps smiling even when people take advantage of her. But the girl says it's totally worth getting angry at the bad guys. She spent every single day begging the gods to give the girl the strength to fight back against her bullies, and after years of waiting, her wish finally came true as the maid walked up to greet her. Agnosh sat there fighting back happy tears because her friend finally admitted she was weak and actually got mad at someone else for once. Tater was totally on edge watching this weirdness, thinking he was facing some unknown monster because he couldn't make sense of anything that was happening. Norah tells the crowd that this monster is actually Koko, the girl they once saved. And even though no one can explain these scary transformations, they all know she'd never actually be their enemy. Toru carefully wrapped up the girl's severed arm and promised he'd get her real help soon. He let out a heavy sigh, telling her he really wanted to stop her pain. The rabbit grabbed her hands and told her not to freak out, explaining that Paracelsus was actually snatched by a total traitor. He told her to get some rest and chill out, promising he'd explain every single detail of that crazy mystery once she was back on her feet. Norah screamed Koko's name at the top of her lungs, praying she could still hear her even though the girl was sitting there completely frozen and unable to move. The maid is totally losing it, screaming that her master was snatched and begging for help right now, but the tutor tries to hold her back, telling her to stay calm and wait for the perfect time to move. The elf totally spooked the rabbit with her sudden moves, but she finally got it together and rushed forward after being invited. Norah leaped onto Koko's paws and told the terrified guest to rush them to where the master was snatched, leaving the father's spirit all alone in a strange body, feeling totally worried and sad. Paracelsus spent forever wondering how Norison would handle the news, trying to imagine the total mess of emotions and thoughts that would hit her once she found out what happened. Fake Norah gets totally serious and explains they're facing two huge problems at once that need to be fixed right now. She told them the zombies are still the biggest threat because if the Dark Knight can just keep raising the dead, he'll never run out of soldiers no matter how many they kill, so... The second big problem is that mirror, because even if the zombies vanish or stop being a threat, the real danger isn't going anywhere. That mirror is still just as deadly as ever. If the Dark Knight actually escapes this mess, everyone else is basically stuck in the mirror world forever. Because if he decides their powers are useless to him, there's zero chance they... Paracelsus wondered why the enemy wasn't just spamming a massive zombie army to end the fight, but fake Norah figured they must have a good reason for holding back. The Dark Knight made it clear he's after the boy's powers, telling him to survive the zombie horde until he returns in 3 months for an answer. And Norah realized these were the exact same words he used when they first met. Our guy was pretty sure the enemy couldn't actually boss the zombies around directly. Since the villain was stuck in another world, he just wanted to figure out why this dude was so obsessed with stealing his. He warned him not to just rush in screaming, but to keep his secret power hidden until the perfect moment to win, and Paracelsus totally agreed since he had no plans of staying there forever. He was totally blown away by how smart this girl was, and her words finally gave him the peace he needed, wiping away all his stress and making him feel super confident. Norah humbly says she barely helped, and that all the genius ideas were actually his, making the guy feel totally flustered but also super happy and warm inside. He suddenly realized the girl was just a total fake made from his own dreams, and he felt super embarrassed for letting his imagination play him like that. Norah calmly told the host he just needs some kind words from someone close, and there's totally nothing wrong with that. After getting a good look at the guy he was talking to, Paracelsus realized he could only trust his own brain. Basically, the girl says Norah only has 3 simple tricks for her master. She can appear before him, stop his suffering, and if it really comes down to it, she can end his life without any pain at all. She told him straight up that she only has 3 simple jobs, and she begged him to keep those limits in mind while sounding a little worried for him. The maid felt this total sense of peace, knowing that no matter how crazy things got, they'd always be by each other's side, and even if it was the very end, She looked super sad, saying even the real Norah never got that kind of honor before she just vanished into space without a trace. At first, the kid was totally shaking with nerves, but he quickly locked in, took a deep breath, and decided to stay cool so he could figure out exactly what was going on. He saw right away that the inner gardens were now a massive farm with the perfect setup for growing food and raising animals. Since they had everything they needed right there, the people in the castle basically never had. The dirt here is actually super soft and perfect for new seeds, showing that someone's been taking serious care of this place to make sure everything grows perfectly. Before he got here, Paracelsus was grinding on the farm with his dad all day, and he was so wrecked that even the smallest move hurt like crazy. Thinking back on that, he started wondering why muscles get so worn out and how he could make his body recover way faster. Paracelsus was super hyped by all the different monsters in the undead world, but since he only saw zombies instead of skeletons or ghosts, he realized the big boss's skills were actually pretty. Since zombies still have muscles and brains under all that rot, they're way easier to control than skeletons, who need a massive magic boost just to move around. The kid realized that if just one page of his recipe wiped him out, managing a whole zombie army would be insane, so he tried to find a way to wreck their muscles without using all his energy. He jerked his head to the side, looking totally wiped out as he stared at whatever just caught his eye. A clump of dirt suddenly appeared in his hand, and Paracelsus was so hyped she started spinning around to check out every single inch of the place. The guy stared at Goldie and asked where the darkest, dampest spot in the building was, so he could grow some really special plants. He was super hyped because he finally found the perfect spot that checked every single box on his list. She looked at him in total shock, asking what could possibly make him look that hyped and happy. Paracelsus bragged about finding slug slime, and when Goldie asked if they could use it as acid to melt zombies, he told her he had an even crazier use for it. He kept the story going, explaining how some snails literally eat sound while others just hide and wait for their prey, showing that these things change so much depending on where they live that they can... She was totally panicking, asking if this special snail would really wipe out the zombies and if they'd be safe, but he just played it cool and said snails are basically harmless to people. He started telling the story with so much hype, going all the way back to when alchemy was the biggest thing in the world. Alchemists were so obsessed with science that they started mashing humans and animals together in crazy experiments, creating all sorts of creepy hybrids and terrifying monsters. He explained how a simple experiment went totally wrong when some basic slime mutated into a terrifying black monster that started devouring everything and growing massive, making everyone freak out that this thing was going to swallow the entire world. Suddenly, one of the first elves showed up and taught everyone how to blast fire magic. That was the start of a massive new era of magic for all of them, even though they beat the scary monster. The kid kept the story going, explaining how those old-school alchemists fixed their past mistakes by locking a permanent trait into the snail's DNA that stays there, no matter how much they change. This special trait made the slugs super friendly toward humans. They became so curious and loving that it basically became their whole personality. Pretty soon, all the scary slugs that used to hate people just totally disappeared on. Paracelsus is only making a weak slime for now, but he's so confident in his crafting skills that he knows it'll take down every last zombie and keep the squad safe. Goldie totally lost her patience and cut them off, demanding to know exactly what kind of snail the guy was trying to create. He stood up and said he had to clear something up before making the slug, admitting that when he first got his special power, he was in such a rush that he totally missed the details on how spells are actually super simple because you just have to hold the right item to use them. And even though Paracelsus isn't an expert, he could tell the Dark Knight was messing with some scary forbidden death magic. She was totally lost and had no idea how things ended up like this, so he rushed to calm her down, pointing out that he didn't even have his books or notes with him in the dark. He finally realized she'd been carrying that book since the moment they met, and he was so dying to know her secret that he asked to see what was inside. Paracelsus agreed to check out the book, but he warned them that if it's actually the Dark Knight in disguise, things are going to get super dangerous. She asked what he'd do if she was actually the Dark Knight, and he promised he wouldn't snitch or steal her power as long as she let them out of the trap, and Goldie was totally blown away by how honest that answer was, and he literally couldn't believe his ears. She handed him the book without a second thought, letting him check it out for as long as he needed. Paracelsus grabbed the book and realized just holding it wasn't enough since it didn't explain how to steal powers. So he figured there had to be a secret trick to actually making someone. He knew this firefight was about to get crazy, but then he figured out that pumping magic straight into his artifact let him skip the long chance for instant, overpowered attacks while keeping his mind totally focused on the rest of the battle. Goldie literally just stumbled onto this super rare relic while browsing a local magic shop, but honestly, she could have gotten one whenever she wanted since she's got massive connections and basically infinite money. Paracelsus was totally confused why she'd never heard of this massive slug disaster from the past. I mean, this event is basically Alchemy 101, and the very first thing She was honestly stoked because he wasn't some clueless idiot. but a sharp guy who actually listened and asked some really deep questions. She admitted she never had a teacher and had to learn everything alone because her family was broke, and since she only knows a basic fireball, she's honestly not even on the level of... Without that grimoire, even a basic fireball would have taken forever, and at this range, Goldie was a sitting duck. She even dared him to check, making him wonder if she really... Paracelsus turned bright red and started apologizing for his massive screw-up, even dropping to his knees to show her how much he truly regretted it. He was sure he'd been a total jerk, but she actually loved how much he noticed and told him he was super sharp, even asking him to speak his mind more often. She loved that he didn't just trust her and actually checked her background, but what really got her was his reaction. Because honestly, who thinks a hardcore villain is just gonna stop being evil just because you asked him nicely? Goldie warned him that if she were a real enemy, he'd be toast for being so open, and while being suspicious is smart, trying to play the lone wolf without any backup is just a fast track to losing. Paracelsus poured his heart out, begging for a way to end the war without any more fighting so he could keep his friends and family safe. She got totally serious and told him to listen up, because they weren't there by accident. Everyone was putting their life on the line for the same goal. If he wants to survive this nightmare, he's got to stop being so naive, face the brutal truth, and ditch those childhood dreams for good. Meanwhile, the Dark Knight is standing with a massive army of zombies, just waiting for the enemy to show up so he can get the jump on them in the big fight. Suddenly, this girl with fire in her eyes pops up and shouts that their biggest enemy is finally at the gates, ready for the ultimate showdown. Goldie charged straight toward the danger, telling Dahlia to catch the new guy up and explain their whole plan. The guy nervously asked what he was supposed to do, so the girl just softly told him to come closer. Dahlia explains that she's pumping all her magic straight into her palms to trigger the spell, and Paracelsus is totally stunned when the symbol starts glowing with insane power. He looked into the glowing mirror and suddenly saw a creepy, twisted face in the darkness watching their every move. He was so blown away by what he saw that he had to ask how it worked, and she explained that her hand gestures automatically trigger the right magic circles. It all comes down to how you position your fingers, with the index acting as the gate, the ring as the reverse, and the middle controlling the tower's magic circle. But since this portal only lets sound and light pass, you can't actually throw or shoot anything through it. The guy thought he wouldn't see anything from the top of the tower. Dahlia showed him that pressing the pinky finger makes the light and sound way stronger, and she proved it right then. The Dark Knight saw it was the same kid and told him to come down, but the boy stood his ground and said he wasn't ready to die, so the villain mocked him by asking if Paracelsus promised the girls they'd be totally safe since he had a foolproof way to wreck the entire zombie army, and if the Dark Knight even tried to jump in, He promised he didn't want to hurt anyone and just wanted everyone to go home safely without any more trouble. The Dark Knight just laughed, calling him a total weakling and saying that was way. The Dark Knights mocked the guy, saying weaklings are only good for dying, and then one of them offered the girls a deal. Hand over the boy, and they get to go back to the real world. The monster gives the girls just 1 hour to decide, warning them that he's done being nice, and if they don't follow his rules, he'll stop treating them like prizes and throw them straight to the zombies. Goldie turned to Sylvia and asked if she'd heard the enemy talking trash. She told her to get the word out so they could all plan their next move together. Goldie decided to stay back. Paracelsus realized things were going south fast and told Dahlia to kill the spell immediately, and she didn't hesitate for a second since she knew they had to act right now. He was totally obsessed with making a special slug to wipe out hordes of zombies, so he told his assistant to grab the gear and help him bring this crazy plan to life. To make this weird mix, you're gonna need a big wooden barrel, a fresh slug, some regular pebbles, dry leaves, veggie scraps, and some rich dirt. First, poke a hole in the bottom of the barrel and layer in gravel, compost, leaves, and food scraps. But you've got to watch how much live food the snail eats so it doesn't. He explains that the next move is to super carefully drop that baby snail into its special new home. Paracelsus knew snails can't stand the heat or dry air, so he made sure to fill the jar with fresh, cold water. Once you've got all the ingredients in, you have to seal that lid shut, but make sure to pop it open every now and then to let it breathe and give it a good stir. This snail is a total beast that absorbs everything it touches to adapt. eventually evolving and gaining new powers until it transforms into the microbial snail. Dahlia was totally shocked by how fast the snail crushed through the materials, but Paracelsus explained that his secret method makes the whole system speed up at the end to make everything perfect. He explained that his secret recipe fixes the slug's weak points, using it as a massive bargaining chip to finally get sent home, and the girl was totally down with his sneaky plan. Knowing the enemy could strike from any direction, he crafts 3 extra bullets to beef up his defense, while his loyal assistant promises to have his back no matter what. Dahlia was totally hyped about the win, and her face was literally beaming because she and the squad finally hit their goal of making 3 brand new slimes. The guy suggested putting slugs right where the zombies would attack, saying that even if he couldn't stop them, they'd definitely slow the monsters down. The girl asked what was up with the second barrel, and the boy just smiled, saying it was a little side project he worked on whenever he had a spare minute. He told them that was the exact thing he'd been dying to ask about. Dahlia was totally obsessed with how cool alchemy sounded, so she shyly asked if she could learn the craft and become a master herself. Paracelsus asked if she made that spell herself, and she totally flexed, saying she's self-taught and could even master healing magic if she had more free time. He realized mastering alchemy was going to be a total grind, because while wizards use magic, alchemists deal with raw elements and primal matter, and there's a massive line between the two. He explained that alchemists use this primal matter as a basic building block to craft items, while wizards use it as the raw energy that fuels all their crazy magic. If you try using magic to turn primal matter into fire with alchemy, you're going to feel a massive natural resistance pushing back against you. You could even try using alchemy like magic, stuffing power into bottles and mixing it all up to create something brand new. But no matter what you do, it's always going to end in a total disaster. Doing stuff that makes no sense triggers a hidden persuasion magic called subconscious pressure, making everyone feel like what's happening is straight up impossible. Paracelsus explains that under massive pressure, you'll fail even if you're super confident, which is why alchemy labs and magic buildings are never built near each other since both sides stay far. Hardly anyone can master both alchemy and magic unless they're a total natural or work like crazy, and this rare combo definitely caught Dolly's eye. He flashed a supportive grin and told them that wanting to level up is always a win, promising to teach them everything he knows the second he gets a chance, while the girls thanked their awesome mentor for the kid told the snail to stay chill, but then he heard footsteps behind him and spun around to see Goldie calling out to him. She wrapped up the talk and told Dolly and Paracelsus to head upstairs, and he knew exactly what that meant. He finally had the green light to check out the second floor of the old building. They headed up to the second floor and stepped into a huge hall where you could literally feel the tension in the air. He scanned the room and counted about 20 people, while Goldie mentioned that even though a few guys were outside on lookout, most of the gang was right here. Paracelsus is huffing and puffing, totally drenched in sweat, when he spots a group of people looking absolutely wrecked, and he instantly realizes they must have just barely survived a zombie. She caught him staring and told him to knock it off, making him turn bright red and apologize instantly because he knew he was being way too awkward. Goldie introduced the new guy to the whole crew, knowing most of them had already heard the rumors. She made sure everyone knew he had crazy powers that could actually stand up to the dark. Lily straight up asked him if they even stood a chance against the Dark Knight, and Rose backed her up, saying they already knew his first move and were ready to hear about the second one. Paracelsus explains that the Dark Knight has 2 main tricks, controlling the dead and jumping into the mirror world. But since they already know his secrets, they've got a huge lead, and he keeps his second power a total secret because the enemy might be spying on them right now, using a spell to see and hear everything through the eyes of zombies, flies, and even mice. The kid says he's actually got a genius plan to win, so Violet gets hyped and makes him explain the whole thing to the squad to see if it's legit. This guy suggests a super risky plan to hand himself over to the power of the Dark Knight. The second Dahlia hears this, she jumps out of her chair, totally hyped up. But even then, Goldie, Sylvia, Violet, Lily, and Rose all whipped around in total shock, staring at him like he'd lost his mind because they couldn't believe their new ally was actually planning something that dangerous. Paracelsus said the Dark Knight was definitely going to show up, and that's when they'd hit him with a finishing move, but the others wondered if he was really planning to take He explains that if they all rush in together, the enemy will just run away and drag the fight out forever, so they need a surprise attack to end this thing fast. Paracelsus decided to handle the fight solo, telling the crew to jump in only if he starts winning, but if he starts losing, they better stay back while he makes a run for it. Sylvia thought the guy's offer was totally wild, and with a sneaky smile, she got super hyped for a risky, high-stakes duel. Sylvia wanted to see what the kid was really made of and told him to go all out, and he didn't hesitate to step up to the challenge. Dahlia burst through the door and sprinted into the hallway, screaming for Paracelsus at the top of her lungs. The little girl nervously spoke up, saying he was trying to cut a deal with the enemy to save the prisoners, but her shaky voice made it clear she thought going in alone was way too dangerous. The teacher leaned in and whispered that with so many lives on the line, he had to change his mind. He's sticking to the plan because he's got a secret ace up his sleeve to take control, so they just need to team up for one massive hit to end this fast and stay safe. He looked at Dahlia with total trust and told her she was the only one he could count on, whispering for her to protect the important thing he'd already given her. And Dahlia was... Goldie nervously asked if she was getting dragged into the fight, but Paracelsus promised he'd never force her to jump into the action. The master reveals his big plan to breed a massive slug army to wipe out the zombies, and while he puts together a list of everything he needs, he warns that he'll need 3 more people. All he cared about was helping everyone get ready for the big fight, so he pushed his team to keep making those powerful slugs, even if he didn't make it out alive. Goldie noticed the fire getting dimmer and asked Paracelsus what he wanted, and the alchemist was actually shocked she caught such a tiny change in his magic. He explained that slugs are super weak to fire, so he lowered the fire energy to protect them, but even he didn't expect her fireball to get totally nerfed, and she warned him that she'd get way angrier if he kept messing with her magic. Goldie asked if he was seriously turning down their help, but Paracelsus told her he'd handle any trouble on his own, so she called out his confidence and said she had one favor to ask. She begged him that if they had to run and the Dark Knight decided to wipe everyone out, he had to at least save Dahlia because she's way too young to die. Paracelsus chugged the elixir, hoping it would give him a massive power boost. Then, he named the slug Shogoth and asked the little guy if he liked it. The second, he told his partner to watch his every move and follow his lead as he slowly started climbing down the rope ladder, trying to stay steady with every step. A massive horde of zombies was swarming the front of the building, and the square was so packed it looked like a total nightmare for anyone trying to get close. The warrior watched the scene closely, but his face showed he was totally torn between staying strong and letting his doubts take over. Right in the middle of all that chaos stood the big boss, the Dark Knight, leading his unstoppable army and calling every shot like he totally owned the place. Paracelsus knew things were getting real bad, and his enemies were way too scared to step up because they knew exactly how crazy his powers were, while the Black Knight was left totally confused. The villain wasn't wasting a single second and aimed straight for the kid's legs to stop him from moving, bragging that he'd only listened to him beg for mercy once he was totally helpless on the ground. Paracelsus snatched up the slug Shogoth and chucked it right at the zombie horde to buy himself some time. The Dark Knight screamed at his squad to protect him right now because a massive snail was charging straight for them. The squad actually landed a perfect hit on a zombie, and the smart warrior immediately told them to turn those monsters into mulch to stop the infection from spreading. The Dark Knight was totally shook as his zombies literally melted into thin air, leaving him standing there all alone with no idea what to do next. But things got way creepier that night when the slug they just tossed out started growing massive right in front of them, and everyone was totally losing it. Paracelsus thought this was a genius move and shouted for them to start turning zombies into compost again, telling everyone to just keep adding more and more to the recipe. The Knight of Darkness could tell things were getting way too dangerous as that slime kept devouring the burnt corpses, growing so massive and powerful that it could wipe out his entire army and even turn on. Out of nowhere, those slugs lunged and snatched the closest zombie, leaving the army leader totally frozen in shock as the slimy monsters swallowed their victim whole and grew bigger by the second. Paracelsus was totally shocked and terrified as his tiny assistant suddenly started growing like crazy, turning into a massive, gross slug right before his eyes. The Dark Knight started screaming at his panicking zombies, ordering them to get it together and ambush the hero so they could finally finish him off. A massive wave of screaming zombies sprinted right at the kid, and seeing that chaotic mess coming his way made him absolutely freak out. The Dark Knight bailed to save his own skin, but Paracelsus screamed that he wasn't letting him get away and charged straight through the zombie horde into total danger. He dove straight into the giant slime shoguffer and got swallowed up by its gross, pulsing body. The assistant made an air bubble inside its body so its master could breathe easy. The guy started frantically patting himself down, desperate to find the hidden item. He finally felt a small pouch and breathed a... Paracelsus turns to his weird partner and asks to be launched into the sky, and even though the guy looks totally blank, he obeys and throws the alchemist so high it's like he's flexing his insane strength for the whole world to see. Way up in the sky, the guy is totally freaking out about the height, but he pulls himself together to find the target, and the moment he spots the enemy, he chucks that super important pouch right at him. Our hero was totally bummed and annoyed that he missed his shot, but Dahlia was already one step ahead back at the castle, having calculated everything so she could jump in and fix his mistake. She yelled that catching him was the only thing that mattered and immediately bolted toward the south. She cast a flight spell on the wind, making it shift instantly so the bag would zoom straight toward its target. Out of nowhere, the wallet drops right in front of the Dark Knight, and Paracelsus is hyped that his hidden magic circle actually worked, so he gives his assistant a quick shout. Dahlia wasn't sure the pouch would reach the target, so she set it on fire to give it a massive speed boost and steered it with her own eyes to make sure it hit the mark. The Dark Knight just stood there totally confused, staring at the weird bag, when suddenly it flashed bright and blew up right in his face, blasting him with burning pieces. Paracelsus saw the massive blast and started cheering because his plan worked out exactly how he wanted. Violet was super hyped to see the enemy army get roasted by the flames, and Rose totally agreed as they both stood there shocked by the insane power of the explosion they just pulled off. Paracelsus was seriously impressed because even from way back, he could still feel the crazy heat and the massive force of the blast. The Dark Knight shows up, totally sure that nobody could survive a blast that close, but just as he spots a survivor, a massive explosion swallows everything. The guy was totally lost and had no clue what just happened, but he was sure that crazy fireball was behind the whole mess. Goldie screamed for everyone to stay alert because something massive was charging in from the west, and Rose was so terrified she couldn't even move. A massive, terrifying monster suddenly blocked the two archers, and the girl was so freaked out that her heart started pounding like crazy. The second Violet saw the monster, she realized it was a legit dragon, and her heart started racing as she screamed at her friend to run for their lives before it attacked. Out of nowhere, the monster rips its jaws open and blasts a massive wave of liquid that floods everything in front of it. Paracelsus was totally hooked watching the Dark Knights turn dead bodies and even massive giants into a zombie army, so he told Shoggoth they had to floor it to the cathedral right now. But these zombies were so obsessed with killing that they kept clawing their way to the top of the slime, even as the acid started melting their bodies away. He was trying his best to stay chill and focus on the recipe, but suddenly he felt someone super dangerous rushing straight toward them. The Dark Knight jumps out of the shadows, grabs the kid by his collar, and gets ready to shut down his dangerous experiments for good. He grabbed the warrior and chucked him straight into the zombie swarm, then he confidently ripped off his mask to show everyone who he really was. He chucked the mask away like it was nothing, and floated in the monster's thick slime, but the mask landed perfectly on a zombie's head, making the creature look like a goofy cartoon character. Before Paracelsus could even clear his head, that same zombie snatched him up, now rocking a second mask that made its two faces twist in totally different directions. The knight was basically laughing because the villains finally won and were celebrating their total takeover. The knight felt like a monster ready to crush the hero's skull, but after winning, he realized this guy wasn't just some regular person, even if he didn't have any crazy. The villain barked an order to see if the warrior's recipe was finished, and the kid suddenly realized they weren't even talking to him. The Dark Knight told his invisible helper to stay out of it, since this fight was strictly personal. Paracelsus figured out some of the girls had hidden powers, and they were the ones in. The guy told Shoggoth to rush to the cathedral and protect Dahlia no matter what, since he was totally out of energy, while the Dark Knight ordered everyone to shut up and watch him because he knew he was about to win. Out of nowhere, Sylvia jumps in front of everyone with a glowing sword and charges the enemy, making every strike look super smooth and perfectly timed. The guy is stumbling and can barely stay up, gasping for air while clutching his bleeding chest after the girl landed that perfect hit. Paracelsus asks why she's there, and she admits he just seemed cool, so she followed him because she's gonna die soon anyway and figured this was as good a... The guy shouted that the real action was happening at the cathedral right now, and since everyone was in serious danger, they had to sprint there as fast as they could. Sylvia said he'd totally lost it, risking his life to save everyone's souls instead of just playing it safe. Paracelsus tries to rush Sylvia out, but she snaps back that she's already leaving and he needs to back off. He stops her, though, explaining that she's under. He turned to Norah for help, and after seeing how messed up he was, she begged him to stay away from the cathedral because he was too injured to even walk without her healing his pain. She begged him to ditch the others and just save the boy, so the guy asked Sylvia which girls could write spells, and she told him only Goldie and Dahlia had that power. He started getting paranoid that someone was eavesdropping, but if anyone was actually listening, it had to be Goldie. She's the only one who could pull off a connection like that. Paracelsus looked at all the clues and thinks the Dark Knight is actually one of those two girls, Goldie or Dahlia. He figured out his Dark Knight powers let him make mirror worlds and control the dead, and even though he might steal more skills later, he's just going to stick with these two for now. She's too scared to fight him head-on, proving she's just as big a coward as he is, so the plan is to wait for the perfect opening, swipe his powers. Sylvia saw right through their act and knew they were just trying to get close, so she asked the guy what he'd do if his suspicions were actually true. Paracelsus made it clear that he'd jump into the fight himself to crush the enemy and get everyone home, but if he somehow lost, he'd pass all his crazy powers to Dahlia before he went down. Sylvia warns that Dahlia could be an enemy, but the guy says if she has powers, she'll be hunted too. And even if she's the one who kills him, it doesn't mean she's a threat to everyone else. Any normal person would have turned tail and run just to stay alive. He wanted to make every second count, knowing he'd never forgive himself if he abandoned that kid. The sheer stress of... Paracelsus handed a friend the recipe meant for Dahlia, but Sylvia cut him off and told him to keep his mouth shut so she could deliver the news herself once they prove they've won. The Dark Knight sliced one of his own zombies right in half, and a creepy black magic sword started glowing from inside the body. The Dark Knight lunges forward with his sword, but Sylvia senses the danger and whips out her blade just in time to block the strike and save her friend. She reacted in a flash and landed a massive hit, sending Paracelsus stumbling back until he finally collapsed and passed out. The Dark Knight let out a mocking laugh, admitting he lives for the rush of a fight where death is right on his heels, and Sylvia totally agreed because that insane danger is what brings them closer than anything else. Paracelsus was totally shocked by how insanely strong this random city girl was, but she told him they were almost finished and that he should just go on ahead, so he agreed and kept. The guy jumped up and rushed to catch up with his crew, while back at the cathedral, that dragon was still trying to smash its way in to eat the girls. Out of nowhere, a fireball slams right into him, and while Goldie's checking if everyone's okay, Violet screams at her to run because the dragon is still spitting poison and getting ready for another massive blast. Shogot pops out of nowhere and blasts the dragon, leaving Goldie totally hyped because she never expected such a beast of a defender to show up right when she needed him most. That gross slug latched onto the dragon's scales, trying to eat the whole thing in one bite. But the dragon wasn't going down without a fight. It felt the danger and blasted its... Paracelsus saw the hit and realized it could melt even a Shoggoth, proving this poison was a total beast that could take down any monster no matter how big or strong they were. He realized things were getting serious because the snail was totally defenseless against that poison, and taking the dragon's gift would be a total disaster. He never expected to run into his snail friend's worst enemy, and now that he's stuck in the middle of the battlefield, he's scrambling to figure out just how much trouble he... The alchemist knew right away his first hit worked, so he told his monster to grab whatever was left of the giant and land one last strike to finish the fight for good. Shoggoth did exactly what his master said, used every bit of energy he had left, and rushed forward. When he got close, the slug stopped right in front of the dragon to time their... That slime just wouldn't quit, slamming into the giant over and over with everything it had until the big guy started shaking, his muscles tearing and bones snapping while that deadly poison melted him from the inside. Paracelsus saw the hit land and hyped up Shoggoth, yelling at him to keep going and strike with even more power. Out of nowhere, Goldie pops up right next to the guy to see what's going down. He spins around and begs her to tell him how to get inside so he can save everyone. Goldie tells him the first ladder is trashed, but she's already setting up a backup while the guy begs her to hurry because every second counts when lives are on the line. Paracelsus was blown away by the dragon's insane power. It looked totally invincible. Even though the slime was hitting it with everything, it barely left a scratch, but it still kept the dragon on the defensive. Then, out of nowhere, the slime suddenly hoisted its master even higher into the sky. Shoggoth ripped off a chunk of its own body to scoop up its creator and carry him away from the danger. This totally saved the alchemist from getting crushed in the blast zone. The monster put. The guy just stood there, totally stunned by what he'd just seen. His best friend actually sacrificed a piece of himself just to keep him safe. This power was super cool, but also terrifying. Paracelsus stared at his friend's body, feeling totally crushed, but Goldie suddenly snapped him back to reality and told him he needed to focus on saving the rest of the team. She panics and tells him to grab Dahlia and run before the whole building collapses, but he's terrified and asks if she can even make it out on her own. Goldie stood her ground and refused to leave, making it her mission to protect all the injured people who were too hurt to run away. Paracelsus instantly caught on after Goldie's heads up. Dahlia found the exit and is waiting in the library's north wing, so he has to book it over there right now to pull off his big escape. He realized right away that the enemy was just trying to box him in and make him an easy target, and knowing that was his only real shot at escaping the trap and staying alive. He figured the attacks would stop if he just bailed, and if there was a traitor in the group, he had to get out of there fast, but he couldn't understand why Gold. He figured they were letting him get close just to take them both hostage, or maybe Dahlia and Goldie were secretly working together, or Goldie was just so desperate to keep her safe. Splitting those two power users up was a massive win since he could finally figure out who the real enemy was, and if he still couldn't find the culprit, he'd just... Paracelsus realized his enemies could have taken him out a long time ago, but for some reason, they let him live. He wasn't sure if it was because of a secret. Dahlia locked eyes with her teacher, who dropped a total bombshell. She'd heard every word and ordered her to get out of the shelter immediately, but Dahlia just looked down and admitted. He asked what she was holding, and she told him it was a spell book, saying there were probably tons more just like it around here. The guy was totally lost and admitted he couldn't read a single word, asking if she was pumping magic into the book to create some kind of special spell. Dahlia explains that you have to pour magic into your writing or it's just normal ink, and after she mentions the book Grimoire Goldie, Paracelsus realizes that if she follows it exactly, she'll actually create a real spell. She says that just moving the magic isn't enough, you also have to flip the symbols like you're looking in a mirror. See, every single letter is mirrored, and if he doesn't write them perfectly, the spell will totally backfire, because he finally realizes that in this mirror world, everything works in reverse. Out of nowhere, the alchemist had this huge realization and knew exactly how to get them out of there, so he waved the girl over and whispered that it was time to make a run for it. Paracelsus finally realized Goldie's magic is actually legit, and after she talked about finding a massive war, he's starting to think this book was originally made in the mirror world. He couldn't stop wondering why she lied when she could have just admitted she found him way before they got there. He figured she probably just got nervous and blurted out a lie without thinking. It finally clicked. Goldie wasn't just lying for fun, she actually wanted him to get closer to that little student. Paracelsus realized he was totally trapped by their sneaky plan, so he gritted his teeth and told Dahlia to head out first, promising he'd give her the signal when it was time to switch directions. He stepped up first to keep his friend safe, and they headed deeper into the dark dungeon, trusting their guts and hoping they'd actually win. Back in the trashed building, Goldie didn't even blink as she told the massive dragon that 2 travelers had already escaped through a secret exit. She raised her hand and whispered a spell, telling that monster it was time to stop eating and vanish forever. The girl was totally fed up, complaining that the nasty smell was straight-up torture and that working next to dragons was basically impossible. Goldie realized those massive monsters and spirits were way too hard to predict, so she decided to stick strictly to zombies from now on. The Dark Knight admitted he totally blew it and got way too carried. Goldie was freaking out and asked if he really got every single slime since even one survivor would be a huge disaster. But the Dark Knight told her to chill because he definitely finished the job. He insisted on being the one to take down Paracelsus, warning her that the kid was way stronger than he looked and had totally wrecked their team. So Chief Goldie just nodded. The knight was basically laughing, dying to see this warrior again. Norah and Koko said goodbye to Paracelsus's cozy home and headed straight into the thick forest to track him down. Before long, they reached a tiny pond that looked totally normal and safe. Norah realized the place looked exactly like the stories, and while the pond felt totally haunted by ghosts, the real source of that creepy energy was actually hidden way down in the depths. She finally figured it out. That shiny water was actually a portal, and the reflection was the secret doorway connecting her world to a whole different dimension. Norah realized this guy was acting way too reckless, and she's convinced a powerful rival has been secretly watching him since long before they met. The Norn group helped the dog hide the soul trail at the pond, but the person in charge definitely noticed the spies and is now rushing their plan for the owner. Burke checked in with Norrie to see if she was still chilling by that pond. The bird started flexing about the mice he caught, and asked her if she wanted to try a bite of his fancy snack. She was literally drooling as she instantly agreed to finally taste the food she'd been waiting for forever. They got a fire going fast and started cooking, and soon the smell of roasted meat filled the air with total cozy vibes. Burke explains that these are called grass mice because they only eat plants, so when you roast them, the meat actually tastes and smells like fresh herbs. That bird looked totally satisfied while bragging about how it only eats prey that's still alive. But Norah was just sitting there catching a whiff of that delicious roasted meat and realizing she was totally starving. She remembered Miss Bjork's super strict ban on meat and wondered if it still counted. But her bird friend explained that even though the boss is a total health nut, she actually knows when to chill out and break her own rules. He said that if she saw the meat, she'd look so heartbroken that even the bird would feel guilty. So, the little bird only sneaks a bite when she isn't looking. Burke thought the hostess was super weird, but he didn't care because she was one of the only people who actually wanted to work with the beast folk, and now she's fighting for everyone. He was sure that even in a world this dark, there had to be someone willing to fight and cry for the people suffering, even if they didn't understand why it was happening. The bird thought, Norn says Paracelsus is coming back in 3 days, so don't freak out. She'll explain everything tomorrow and just needs some serious rest tonight. Paracelsus slowly filled up an old wooden tub with warm water. The water hissed and bubbled, making the whole room smell like fresh herbs. Once the tub was full, he dropped the coin into the warm water, explaining that this bath is the ultimate way to recharge because these special herbs smell amazing and actually fix your body from the inside out so you heal way faster. Just then, the mentor walks in and tells her the healing bath is ready, letting her jump in first. She's totally blown away that it's already done, and realizes the guy's recipe is actually legit. She was super into him now, so she finally worked up the nerve to ask how he actually messed up his eye fighting the Dark Knight. Paracelsus gave her a massive thank you, saying the patient was doing way better thanks to her skills, and Dahlia was totally hyped to see her hard work finally paying off. She made him promise to tell her the second his eye started hurting more, or if anything felt weird. She really just wanted to look out for her mentor and make sure he was okay. Once he finally broke out of that cathedral, he stood there for a while trying to figure out where to run. He kept thinking back to how they snuck through the pitch-black night, moving fast. That's when Paracelsus finally realized how insane healing magic really is, since his friend's powers were the only reason he stopped bleeding. Fixing his vision was pretty much impossible because this constant fog made everything a blurry mess, making it super hard to even move around. Suddenly, the guy starts digging through his beat-up leather bag like a madman, desperate to find something inside. He slowly pulled the pouch out of his bag and held his breath, carefully picking at the tight knots to make sure he didn't mess up. He emptied the bag and found a tiny shoggoth barely hanging on, so Paracelsus decided right then and there to do whatever it took to nurse the little guy back to health. He figured that making some special compost for the slug might help it heal, and that's when a totally wild idea popped into his head. Even if he pulls this off, Goldie's still got fireballs and a poison dragon ready to go, so he started thinking maybe he should just turn the slime into a totally different type instead. It's super rare for adult slugs to switch types, but after studying some old experiments, this guy was convinced his secret recipe would actually work. The hero first thought about picking a basic element for battle, but since they all have major weaknesses, the alchemist decided to cook up something totally one of a kind. Paracelsus knew slugs could be bred to absorb almost anything, so he figured he could make a special one that eats stuff to totally ruin an enemy's day, like a slug that literally devi. He started cycling through his powers: air, stone, sound, light, heat, and magic. And while magic seemed like the best bet, he wasn't sure if his friend could survive the poison while he drained the energy, making the whole plan feel way too risky. He'd heard of adventurers who team up with slimes to turn anything into energy so they can survive in dungeons for days, and while it's super risky, it can give you some insane powers. He realized the plan was basically foolproof, so now he just had to stay focused and perfectly merge his body with this legendary creature. Super worried, the boy leaned over his little buddy and quietly asked if he could even hear him. He told the slime that if it could hear him, it should eat his right eye, memorize his body, and move inside him to start working for him. The Shovgot's creator watched his buddy suffer, and it was totally breaking his heart. His eyes were bloodshot from crying, and his face was soaked with tears right where that slime almost hit him. This tiny snail is slowly creeping across his skin, heading straight for Paracelsus's eye. Every single touch burns like crazy, sending a sharp pulse of pain through his entire body. He was shaking like crazy because even though he could still see, the pain was so brutal he couldn't stop crying, and that gross slime in his eye was sending massive shocks through his whole body. Dahlia kicked back in the hot herbal bath, and all that exhaustion from the last few days finally started to melt away. Suddenly, Goldie turns and asks if she can hear her, her quiet but super clear voice totally snapping her out of those good vibes. Dahlia was totally lost in her own head, and couldn't tell where that voice was coming from, until Goldie suddenly revealed she'd slapped a magic circle on her old partner's neck to hook him up to the world's energy. She was totally confused about when Goldie even slipped that magic circle around her neck, but then Goldie just straight up admits she did it without asking. Dahlia's voice was shaking as she asked if Goldie really controlled a massive zombie army in the dark night, and with one simple nod, Goldie confirmed her absolute worst nightmare. She explained that leaving Paracelsus and Dahlia alone was just part of the plan, but now that she's finally scored that secret recipe, she's got everything she needs to. Goldie tells the girl to swipe the recipe from the mentor since the guy totally has a crush on her and would give it up easily. He says the secret formula is tucked right in his front. Totally shaken and hurt, she finally asked why the other girl went to such crazy extremes to manipulate her, but the only answer she got was that it was way too complicated to explain. Dahlia finally snaps at the girl who's just rotting away in this creepy house, waiting for zombies to eat her because she's totally forgotten what it's like to be free or even have a normal life. She told him she escaped with Paracelsus and is finally free to see the world, but he reminded her she's the villain who killed all their friends, and she just admitted. Dahlia confessed her ultimate dream was to take out Goldie and spend forever with this guy, believing her friend's memories were the only proof she was actually real, while Goldie listened closely and asked. Paracelsus was stoked when the pain in his eye finally died down, and as he looked around, he realized his right eye was back, and everything looked way sharper and brighter than before. He looked around with wide eyes, totally shocked by how different everything looked, like the whole world had suddenly upgraded to 4K quality. He started testing his eyes and realized something crazy. If he really focused on stuff far away, his vision actually got super sharp and clear. Out of nowhere, the guys spotted something wild way up on the hill where two tiny ladybugs were straight up brawling, kicking and shoving each other like total pro wrestlers. Paracelsus was totally hyped by this discovery and was dying to learn more, so he decided to test his new powers and see exactly how far his crazy vision could reach. The guy starts stumbling because his eyes are totally out of sync. His left eye is normal, but his right eye is seeing everything in crazy high def, making his vision double and completely wrecking his balance. Dahlia burst through the door and panicked, asking her mentor if he was hurt, but he just gave her a grin and said he was totally fine and had only tripped. He realized he totally forgot to leave some fresh clothes for the girl by the bathroom, and he felt super awkward about it. Dahlia went up to her mentor with a super weird request, telling him she thought a magic circle had popped up on her neck. She asked him to check it out and wipe the mark away if it was actually there, and he took her seriously, agreeing to help her out right away. She realized that if she didn't pump any mana into it, the magic circle would stay totally invisible. She decided to switch things up and told him to aim his magic right where his fingers touched her skin. And even though Parasalt was super shy, he thought the idea was pretty wild and agreed. Now that he figured out his new power, he put it to the test by zooming in his right eye to see the hidden details of the magic circle. As he keeps looking, he suddenly spots a weird circular mark on her neck that looks just like a seal. The girl is totally freaked out because she hasn't even used a drop of magic yet. She asks him if he can see the magic glowing in her hand, and when he nods, she realizes the bath totally refilled her mana to the point where she's leaking power without even trying. Paracelsus realized the Eye of Shoggoth let him see things no normal person could, but he kept it a secret because he was worried Goldie was listening in, while Dahlia... He left the girl inside and started scaling the roof, testing every single grip to make sure it was solid. And as he looked back, he heard her whisper a quick warning for him to. As he kept climbing, he realized he needed a safe spot for his alchemy, but since there were no workshops around and all these religious buildings were messing with his head, he knew he was in a tough. Paracelsus stopped for a second, debating whether to keep hunting for a gear shop or a lab, but then a new idea hit him, checking out that massive castle sitting right on top of the mountain. Out of nowhere, the guy shouts that he sees people in the castle window, but Dahlia is totally lost and just blinks while trying to spot what he's pointing at. He told his friend to hang back while he crept up to the castle window, and his jaw dropped when he saw a little kid standing right there. Paracelsus couldn't believe his eyes and froze when he saw Dahlia and Sylvia inside the castle, while the girl next to him had no idea why he was suddenly so stressed out. Her mentor asks if she's ever been to that castle, but Dahlia says no way. She barely even leaves the house, and she remembers a massive wall being right in front of it. She said the castle grounds were a total nightmare, packed with regular zombies and freaky monsters that nobody had ever seen before. She kept explaining that there's a big circular zone around the cathedral, and since they failed every time they tried to leave, they only scout and look for food inside that one area. He realized he wasn't the only one stuck behind that wall, so he decided to hunt for more people across the mirror world to see just how massive this mess really was. Paracelsus wanted to check out the buildings outside the fort and figured he'd just go alone, but Dahlia wasn't having it and shouted that she was definitely coming with. A few hours later, the boy is totally shocked to find people living outside the fortress walls, and he even spots Sylvia and the rest of the group hanging out there. He was dying to tell Dahlia the truth, but he had to stop and get his head straight because the secrets he found were super valuable and totally dangerous. As Paracelsus walked along the wall, he noticed there were actually a few more spots nearby where girls were living. I figured there had to be more spots just like this cathedral, totally basic, barely any food, and trapped behind massive walls. If these places were all over the country, there must be tons. But the surprises don't stop there, because these kids are actually waking up a crazy new power. He started listing off Goldie's insane powers, like controlling the dead, jumping through mirrors, and even making clones, which made him realize she probably just stole these abilities from other people. Paracelsus couldn't wrap his head around her actions, so he figured she just had a massive grudge against these people and trapped them in this nightmare where seeing zombies was basically a normal day. He got the chills just thinking about zombies becoming a normal part of his everyday life. He started thinking that maybe Goldie's famous zombie control isn't just some random skill, but a special power built right into her natural magic. He was blown away that thousands of people hating on forbidden magic could actually drain its power just by thinking it's evil. Since the mirror world is totally empty, he can go wild with his magic without any rules holding him back. He wondered what would happen if he filled the place with creatures who thought forbidden magic was just a... This theory shows exactly how Goldie runs a whole zombie army alone, because her powers get a massive boost inside the reflection world. Paracelsus kept a close eye on his partner and realized that Goldie was actually packing some crazy forbidden magic. They talked for a long time because he needed her to hear him out until the very end. He told her that in this world, forbidden magic isn't just banned, it's actually way stronger. The guy says everyone thinks these three powers came from God, but he's betting this place is actually the home of forbidden magic. Except for Goldie. whose reality-bending power is so insane she doesn't even need a source. Dahlia figured out this forbidden magic was trapping way more people than just them for the same reason. And Paracelsus tried to be gentle as he told her that the people on the other. She nervously asked if there were other versions of her living parallel lives, and her mentor confirmed it, saying that's actually the only thing that makes sense. She started noticing these weird gaps and blurry spots in her memory, but the second she realized she might actually be a clone, every single confusing part of her life finally clicked together. Paracelsus thought the news would hit hard, but the girl's reaction was way more intense than he expected, leaving her looking totally broken like she just found out her whole life was a... Out of nowhere, Goldie's voice echoes from the magic seal, sounding totally sarcastic as she admits she's shocked he figured the whole thing out by himself. She was gonna let them enjoy their date, but she realized this guy is way sharper than he looks, and she totally underestimated their chemistry. Paracelsus was totally hyped as he held Daly's head, carefully checking her face and eyes for even the smallest sign of damage. Goldie watched the kid struggle and basically said that trying to take the eyes out was a waste of time, especially since those magic circles were carved into his organs too, spreading through his whole body like a... She told him it'd be a total shame if he accidentally hurt the girl, but her voice sounded so much like a threat that he actually had to stop and rethink his whole plan. He was seriously confused why she just let them walk away, especially since she already knew their whole story about the book was a total lie. Goldie played it cool and realized that even if they were friends, she couldn't just steal his skills, so she decided to switch things up and play the long game to slowly get the upper hand. She told him not to blame Dahlia because all that love and attention was just part of a calculated trap, and he suddenly realized he might have been under a charm spell the whole time. Goldie explained that she'd learned a ton about Paracelsus from everything that happened, and even though she was dying to know more about his second power, she kept it a secret and moved right into the next phase of her plan. The girl flashed a smile and called him a true hero for wanting to keep things peaceful, and she was stoked to find out they were totally on the same page. Goldie asked to borrow his power for just 1 hour, swearing that was all the time she needed. She promised to explain everything once she got what she wanted, letting him decide what to do. The enemy told the guy to meet her at the cathedral, but Paracelsus thought it would have been way easier if she just said what she wanted from the start. Dahlia hung her head and kept apologizing, feeling like she was just a huge burden to her mentor as tears of total regret started rolling down her face. The guy told them there was nothing to worry about and suggested heading back to the cathedral, and the student was totally on board. Goldie realized Dahlia's charm made her the perfect hostage, and she hoped Paracelsus would hand over the recipe personally so the Dark Knight could finally use it however he wanted. The guys kept pushing forward, but they were totally hitting a wall after walking forever without sleep, so they finally decided to take a quick breather before moving on. The mentor summoned a bunch of slimes for backup and had Dahlia draw magic circles to keep them safe if things got crazy. Their deal didn't say they had to rush over right. This slime loves eating gross human waste and cleans you way better than any shower, but it usually hangs out inside parasites and testicles. To make sure his student stayed fresh and clean, the guy gave her a tiny little helper. He told her that washing up is a huge deal because a clean body keeps your soul feeling right. She was way too ticklish, so she begged the snail to quit it and stop cleaning her. Paracelsus was dying to know what this creature was, so Dahlia explained it's a rune seeker that pops up near magic circles and changes its look depending on the spell. By pumping magic through her body, she can pinpoint exactly where those magic circles are hiding and what they actually do. Dahlia explains she's got 2 magic seals hidden behind her eyes and 3 more in her stomach that send every sound and sight straight to the sorcerer. Paracelsus was caught off guard because the magic circles looked totally safe, so he asked if they were going to explode, but the girl just smirked and said she'd be toast by now. She's finally cracking the code, explaining that if you put the magic formula right into the skin, you can tweak the circles to only send blurry locations and muffled voices, but there's still one big catch left. Dahlia realized she'd just be a total drag, so she asked if she could tag along with him instead. Paris told her she had to stay right by his side because being apart was way too risky. He was terrified she'd get snatched, locked up and tortured with magic seals, and he just couldn't. He didn't want to give Goldie another secret weapon, so he kept her right by his side, and Dahlia totally got why. The little girl was honestly so hyped the second she heard someone give her a compliment. Dahlia said she was going to crash for a nap once she finished her art, and Paracelsus told her to hit him up right away if she needed any help. He knew that even with a quick detour, they'd reach the cathedral in less than a day, and he was dead certain this was where everything would finally end. He knew right then that it was finally time to use that potion. This top-tier luck potion is basically pure fortune in a bottle. The magic kicks in the second you take a sip and lasts for a full 24 hours. But don't get... Paracelsus figured you could split potions into 6 doses to save money, but if you spam them, your luck runs out and you become a total loser, so you'd better stick to... He realized they had zero plan and were basically just winging it, praying to get lucky. The master promised it would make him way stronger and told Dahlia to drink up too, and she was totally down for it. He told her that her bed was all set upstairs and he'd be crashing in the room right next door. She thanked him, but honestly, she was low-key hoping he'd stay the whole night. Once he reached the lookout, he finally spotted St. Herman's massive estate. The mirror reflection totally threw him off at first, but that mansion is actually still standing in this world. He walks into Dahlia's room, says good morning, and tells her they need to prep some stuff before the cathedral, so they're taking a different route today. Paracelsus told them there was an alchemist's mansion right in their safe zone and said they should totally check it out, so the girl asked if it belonged to one of his friends. The kid explained that the mansion belonged to his master, a legendary alchemist known as the immortal Saint Germain, but he noticed his teacher's face tighten up the second that name was mentioned. He knew they only had 2 hours to get there, so he hoped to find some insane alchemy materials to craft a secret weapon before heading out. He notices the zombies are all perfectly spaced out, and since that pattern only breaks when they're hunting or dying, he realizes he can find other survivors just by looking for gaps in the line. Suddenly, Paracelsus spotted something crazy. The zombie lines were totally ripped to shreds, and he wondered if someone else was actually out there. He burst into the nearest building and found Sylvia, who looked totally shocked to see them standing there. Knight is so hyped they survived and asks Dahlia for a magic favor, so she rushes right over to help her out. Sylvia thanked the girl and breathed a huge sigh of relief, thinking she'd finally dodged a bullet, but her good luck was about to run out fast. Sylvia said that Dark Knight was a total beast with insane strength and god-tier sword skills, and even though he was way out of her league and crushed her, she was actually hyped about the whole thing. She knew the night was coming and begged for one more shot, wanting to prove she could take him down in a fair one-on-one fight. Paracelsus filled her in on everything that went down. Sylvia realized Goldie was the one pulling the strings and that they were actually just clones. It was hard to believe, but Knight thanked Dahlia and told the guys to give it everything they had, but when they asked if she was coming, Sylvia figured they were staying the night and apologized for not being able to go. She told the guy he better not regret this later, and when Paracelsus said it was time to bounce, she was totally down. Over at St. Herman's mansion, there were 2 separate labs for him and his student, mostly because Herman was super paranoid and terrified that someone would swipe his secret recipes. Paracelsus realized the second workshop was a total snooze fest, so he headed over to the first one to see what was up. Dahlia was super annoyed because she believed teachers should actually help their students, but this guy wouldn't even let the boy see the workshop. He just shrugged and said they had to figure things out. The guy had no clue what anyone would even want to steal from a shut-in in a locked room, so he apologized for barging in and started scanning the old workshop that was totally loaded with gear. Paracelsus scanned the area for loot and warned the squad about hidden traps, right as Dahlia called out to him. She showed him the glowing magic circles on the wall, and he realized it was a hidden safe only special people could see. But they got super lucky because a weird glitch basically flipped the security and turned. Plus, there were 3 keyholes on the circle that the teacher was totally trying to hide, and looking at Celine, Paracelsus realized he'd just hit the jackpot. Once the slime got a name, his brain totally leveled up and he started crushing every conversation like it was a game, proving he could handle even the toughest jobs. So the guy was hyped that Dolly notices the book is a total mismatch, so the guy figures it might be written in reverse, and while he's hunting for forbidden magic like the stuff on the ceiling, he reads that staying up late ruins your focus and decides to hit the hay by 10. You gotta keep your food balanced with plenty of veggies, meat, and grains. Definitely don't go overboard and stuff your face, though. It's actually way better to pack in as many. Dahlia's skeptical that following rules can keep you alive that long, But Paracelsus mentions rumors that her people made living water for immortality, even though he doubts simple advice could ever. He suddenly remembered his teacher's warning that just memorizing recipes is so easy even a dog could do it, and if he wanted the real secret, he'd have to look way deeper. The old guy told him there are no shortcuts to getting strong. He said you have to grind the basics every single day until you're a total master. All that hard work is the only way to... He remembered his master's warning that he'd fail the alchemy exam if he didn't share his secrets. But the teacher was just a selfish jerk who only gave out tasks that helped. His face twisted up as Dahlia noticed new wrinkles popping up on his skin, and the boy realized he had to find some living water or a cure no matter what. Paracelsus went all out trying to find the secret to staying young, but after tons of research, he came up with absolutely nothing. He mentioned that St. Herman found all sorts of secrets while hunting for the elixir of life, and since the guy worked so hard, he was sure something huge was left behind. Then he spotted a piece of the philosopher's stone recipe, and a crazy new idea suddenly clicked in his head. He spotted this insane liquid that melts everything it touches back into its raw form. It's a legendary universal solvent, and finding it is a total game changer. With this stuff, Dahlia asks if he found anything cool, and Paracelsus just smiles and says he did, but it won't help them right now. Suddenly, the loud thud of an old cane rings through the room. This old dude asked the kid if he was totally sure everything was exactly how he needed it. Herman had no clue what tricks he was doing, and he was totally failing the exam, but he still asked about the flower's weird color, insisting that uncovering the world's secrets too. The teacher understood the drive for results but kept insisting this wasn't alchemy, and honestly, he wasn't going to agree with that no matter what anyone said. St. Herman snapped at them to get lost and never show their faces again. Then he turned to the traveler guy, leaving the boy and girl all by themselves. Paracelsus chucked the book straight into the fire, and when Dahlia freaked out and asked why, he just said he wanted to figure out how to make everything himself. Her mentor hooked her up with some fresh clothes from the estate, and when he asked if she liked them, she gave a huge smile and said she totally loved them. He tells her the suit is fireproof, and so tough that even a zombie bite won't rip it, plus it hides her magic, so she just needs to keep the hood up and gloves on. Paracelsus grabbed a heavy extendable baton from the armory just in case the meeting went south, though he wasn't even sure if he'd actually need to use it. Dahlia was just praying that everything would go smoothly without any more drama. Her mentor pulled her aside and warned her that she'd have to make some seriously tough calls soon. He told her he's ready to throw hands with Goldie even if he dies for it, but first, he wants the girl to pick a side. Dahlia got the point and explained the magic circle hidden inside her, which wasn't dangerous yet but was clearly a trap to turn her into a hostage, though she couldn't spill any. She told them that if she gets taken hostage, they should just leave her behind because she's got so many questions, like how long she's been stuck there, which of her. Dahlia kept going, admitting that finding out she was just a clone was actually a huge relief because it meant her whole life wasn't even real. She couldn't take being there another second, so she begged Paracelsus to just end her life if she couldn't find a way to escape.